In the glittering kitchen of the Grand Manila Hotel, Malaya Santos grips her chef's knife tightly, her knuckles white with tension. The prestigious culinary competition she's dreamed of her entire life is about to begin, but already she can feel the cold stares and hear the whispered slurs from her fellow contestants. As the only Filipina chef in a sea of international culinary stars, Malaya knows she's the underdog, but she's determined to prove her worth. The first challenge begins, and Malaya's hands fly as she prepares her signature dish. But when she reaches for her carefully selected ingredients, her heart stops. Someone has tampered with her supplies, replacing her prized local produce with subpar substitutes. In that moment, Malaya realizes this competition is about more than just cooking. It's a battle against prejudice and sabotage. With the clock ticking and her dreams on the line, Malaya must dig deep into her culinary heritage to create a dish that will stun the judges and silence her critics. But as she scrambles to salvage her chances, little does she know that the reclusive hotel owner is about to make a shocking appearance, one that will change the course of the competition and Malaya's life forever. Before we dive into Malaya's fight against discrimination and her journey to becoming an executive chef, buckle up, get ready, and subscribe for a special surprise tomorrow. The rhythmic chopping of vegetables filled the cramped kitchen as Malaya Santos expertly diced onions, her knife moving with practiced precision. The sizzle of garlic hitting hot oil punctuated the air, and she inhaled deeply, savoring the familiar aroma. At 28, Malaya was in her element here in the kitchen of Kusina, a modest Filipino restaurant tucked away in one of Manila's busy side streets. "Order up, Malaya!" called out Benji, the sous chef, sliding a ticket onto the counter. "Table 5 wants the sinigang and kare-kare." Malaya nodded, her eyes scanning the order as she reached for a pot. "On it," she replied, her mind already racing through the steps to prepare the traditional Filipino dishes. As she worked, adding tamarind to the sour soup and grinding peanuts for the savory stew, Malaya felt a familiar pang of longing. She loved working at Kusina, but she couldn't help feeling that her talents were being wasted on the same menu day after day. The dinner rush passed in a blur of orders, steam, and the clatter of plates. As the last customers trickled out, Malaya began the nightly cleanup, her movements automatic after years of the same routine. She wiped down her station, her thoughts drifting to the high-end restaurants in the city's business district, wondering what it would be like to work in a kitchen where innovation was encouraged and excellence demanded. "Great job tonight, Malaya," said Mr. Reyes, the owner of Kusina, as he passed through the kitchen. "That new twist you added to the sinigang was a hit. Where'd you learn that?" Malaya smiled, a mix of pride and embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Just something I've been experimenting with, sir. My Lola always said that cooking is about feeling, not just following recipes." Mr. Reyes nodded approvingly. "Your grandmother was a wise woman. Keep it up, Malaya. You've got real talent." As the owner disappeared into his office, Malaya felt a surge of warmth at the praise, quickly followed by a twinge of frustration. She was grateful for her job at Kusina, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was capable of so much more. Her mind wandered to the culinary competitions she'd read about online, where chefs from around the world showcased their skills and creativity. What would it be like to compete on that level, to have her dishes judged by renowned culinary experts? Malaya shook her head, pushing the daydream aside as she finished cleaning. It was a pipe dream, she told herself. She was just a line cook in a small restaurant, not some hotshot chef from a fancy culinary school. Still, as she hung up her apron and prepared to leave for the night, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, "What if?" The next morning, Malaya arrived at Kusina early, as she always did. She loved the quiet of the kitchen before the day began, the promise of creation hanging in the air. As she began prepping for the lunch service, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Curious, she pulled it out and felt her heart skip a beat as she read the headline, "Grand Manila Hotel announces international culinary competition." Her eyes raced over the article, taking in the details. The competition would bring together chefs from around the world, challenging them to create innovative dishes that showcase their skills and cultural heritage. The grand prize was a substantial cash award, but more importantly, it offered the winner a chance to stage at some of the most prestigious restaurants in the world. Malaya's mind reeled with possibilities. This was exactly a chance to prove herself on a global stage. But as quickly as the excitement came, doubt crept in. Who was she to think she could compete at that level? She had no formal training, no connections in the high-end culinary world. "What's got you so interested this morning?" Benji's voice startled her out of her thoughts. Malaya hesitated for a moment before showing him the article. "Just reading about this cooking competition. Sounds pretty intense." Benji whistled low as he scanned the details. "Man, that's the big leagues. Can you imagine competing against chefs from all those fancy restaurants?" "Yeah, it's crazy," Malaya agreed, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Probably not for people like us, huh?" Benji shrugged. "Probably not. But hey, you never know, right? You're the best cook in this kitchen, Malaya. If anyone could do it, it'd be you." His words, meant to be encouraging, only intensified the conflict in Malaya's heart. She mumbled a thank you and turned back to her prep work, but her mind was afar away, imagining herself in the Grand Manila Hotel's kitchen, creating dishes that would astonish the judges. Throughout the day, Malaya couldn't shake thoughts of the competition. Every dish she prepared seemed to whisper of possibilities, of flavors she could combine in new and exciting ways. As she stirred a pot of adobo, she found herself considering how she might elevate the classic Filipino dish, perhaps with an unexpected ingredient or a modern cooking technique. When the lunch rush died down, Malaya found herself drawn to the application page for the competition. Her finger hovered over the Apply Now button, her heart racing. What did she have to lose by trying? But then reality set in. The entry fee was substantial, more than she could afford on her modest salary. And even if she could scrape together the money, how could she possibly compete against chefs with years of high-end restaurant experience? "Malaya, can I see you in my office?" Mr. Reyes's voice cut through her thoughts. She quickly closed the browser on her phone and made her way to the small room at the back of the restaurant. Mr. Reyes was seated behind his cluttered desk, a serious expression on his face. "Sit down, please," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Malaya's stomach clenched with anxiety. Had she done something wrong? Was she about to lose her job? "I've been thinking," Mr. Reyes began, "about what you did with the sinigang last night. It's not the first time you've impressed me with your creativity, Malaya. You have a gift, a real talent for flavors." Malaya felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected praise. "Thank you, sir. I just try to make the best food I can." Mr. Reyes nodded. "And that's why I think it's time for a change. I'm promoting you to sous chef." For a moment, Malaya was speechless. Sous chef? It was a significant step up, a recognition of her skills and hard work. But as the initial shock wore off, she felt a twinge of disappointment. Sous chef at Cucina was still a far cry from the culinary world she dreamed of joining. "That's very generous of you, Mr. Reyes," she said carefully. "I'm honored that you think I'm ready for more responsibility." Mr. Reyes smiled. "You've earned it, Malaya, and who knows? Keep pushing yourself, and you might be running your own kitchen someday." As Malaya left the office, her emotions were in turmoil. The promotion was a validation of her talents, but it also felt like a chain tying her to Cucina. How could she even think about entering a prestigious competition now, when she had just been given this opportunity? That evening, as Malaya walked home through the bustling streets of Manila, her mind was a battlefield of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The neon signs of upscale restaurants caught her eye, and she found herself pausing to study their menus, imagining the sophisticated dishes being prepared in their kitchens. She thought of her Lola, her grandmother, who had first taught her to cook. "Cooking is love made visible," she used to say. Malaya could still picture her weathered hands deftly shaping lumpia, her eyes twinkling as she shared the secrets of perfectly balanced flavors. What would Lola think of her now, torn between security and ambition? As Malaya climbed the stairs to her small apartment, she made a decision. She would apply for the competition, even if nothing came of it, even if she was rejected outright. At least she would know she had tried. She wouldn't let fear hold her back from reaching for her dreams. With trembling hands, Malaya opened her laptop and navigated to the competition website. She took a deep breath and began filling out the application, pouring her heart into every answer. When she came to the section asking for her signature dish, she paused, considering carefully. Finally, she typed reimagined sinigang, a journey through Filipino flavors. It would be a risk taking her own spin on it, but isn't that what the competition was all about? Honoring tradition while pushing culinary boundaries. As Malaya hit submit, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Whatever happened next, she had taken the first step towards her dreams. She closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer to her Lola, hoping that somewhere the old woman was smiling down on her, proud of her granddaughter's courage. The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation anticipation and nerves. Malaya threw herself into her work at Kusina, determined to prove that Mr. Reyes's faith in her was not misplaced. But in every spare moment, her mind was on the competition. She scribbled ideas for dishes in a worn notebook, experimenting with flavor combinations in her head. A week after submitting her application, Malaya's phone chimed with an email notification. Her heart racing, she opened the message, her eyes quickly scanning the contents. For a moment, she couldn't believe what she was reading. She had to sit down, her legs suddenly weak. She had been accepted. She, Malaya Santos, line cook turned sous chef at a modest Filipino restaurant, had been selected to compete in one of the most prestigious culinary competitions in the world. As the reality of the situation sank in, a mix of elation and terror washed over Malaya. She had dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here, she felt woefully unprepared. How could she possibly compete against chefs from Michelin-starred restaurants, against culinary school graduates with years of high-end experience? But then she thought of her Lola's words. Cooking is about feeling, not just following recipes. She thought of the flavors of her childhood, of the techniques passed down through generations of Filipino cooks. She had something unique to offer, a perspective and a palate shaped by her heritage and her passion. Malaya took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had a lot of work ahead of her, a mountain to climb, but she was ready for the challenge. Win or lose, she was going to show the world what a Filipina chef from a small Manila restaurant could do. With renewed determination, Malaya began to plan. She would have to tell Mr. Reyes, of course. She hoped he would understand, that he would see this as an opportunity not just for her, but for Kusina as well. And she would need to practice, to refine her ideas and techniques. As she closed her eyes that night, Malaya's mind was filled with visions of the Grand Manila Hotel's kitchen, of judges tasting her creations, of a future bright with possibility. Tomorrow, she would begin her journey in earnest, but for now, she allowed herself a moment to savor this feeling, this first taste of her dreams becoming reality. The next morning, Malaya arrived at Kusina earlier than usual, her mind racing with how to break the news to Mr. Reyes. She found him in his office, poring over invoices with a furrowed brow. "Mr. Reyes, do you have a moment?" Malaya asked, her voice steadier than she felt. He looked up, surprised to see her. "Of course, Malaya. What's on your mind?" Taking a deep breath, Malaya launched into her explanation. She told him about the competition, her application, and her acceptance. As she spoke, she watched his expression carefully, trying to gauge his reaction. When she finished, Mr. Reyes was silent for a long moment. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and said, "I always knew you were destined for bigger things, Malaya. This is an incredible opportunity." Relief washed over Malaya. "So you're okay with this, even though I just accepted the sous chef position?" Mr. Reyes smiled. "Malaya, I promoted you because I believe in your talent. This competition is a chance for you to showcase that talent to the world. Of course I support you." Tears pricked at Malaya's eyes. "Thank you, sir. I promise I'll do my best to make Kusina proud." "I know you will," Mr. Reyes said. "Now what do you need from us to prepare?" Over the next few weeks, Kusina became Malaya's training ground. Mr. Reyes allowed her to experiment with new dishes during slow periods, and her fellow cooks eagerly volunteered as taste testers. Even Benji, who had initially seemed skeptical of the competition, became her biggest cheerleader. "You're going to blow them away, Malaya," he said one evening as they closed up the kitchen. "Those fancy chefs won't know what hit them." Malaya appreciated the support, but doubt still gnawed at her. Every night, she pored over cookbooks and online tutorials, trying to absorb as much knowledge as she could. She practiced techniques she'd never used before, pushing herself to expand her culinary repertoire. As the competition drew nearer, Malaya's nerves intensified. She began to second-guess every decision, every flavor combination. What if her dishes weren't sophisticated enough? What if the judges found her techniques amateurish? One particularly frustrating evening, after Malaya found herself on the verge of tears. She was about to give up when her phone rang. It was her mother. "Anak, how are you?" Her mother's warm voice came through the speaker. "Are you eating enough? You're not working too hard, are you?" Malaya felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm okay, Ma. Just preparing for the competition." There must have been something in her voice because her mother's tone immediately softened. "What's wrong, Malaya? Talk to me." And suddenly, all of Malaya's fears and insecurities came pouring out. She told her mother about her doubts, her fears of not being good enough, of embarrassing herself in front of the culinary world. When she finished, her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Malaya, "Do you remember what your Lola used to say about cooking?" Malaya smiled despite herself. "That it's about feeling, not just following recipes." "Exactly," her mother said. "You have a gift, Anak, a gift that comes from here." Malaya could picture her mother pointing to her heart. "Don't lose sight of that. Cook with love, with passion, with pride in who you are and where you come from. That's what will set you apart." As Malaya hung up the phone, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her mother was right. She had been so focused on trying to match what she thought the other chefs would do that she had lost sight of her own strengths. With fresh determination, Malaya returned to her kitchen. This time, instead of attempting to recreate elaborate French techniques, she focused on the flavors of her childhood. She thought about the dishes her Lola used to make, the street food she loved, the unique ingredients of the Philippines. As she cooked, memories flooded back. The sizzle of garlic reminded her of Sunday mornings in her Lola's kitchen. The scent of coconut milk took her back to summers in the province. With each ingredient she added, each technique she employed, Malaya felt more and more like herself. By the time she plated her dish, a modern take on sinigang that incorporated elements of molecular gastronomy while staying true to the soul of the dish, Malaya knew she had created something special. It wasn't just a meal, it was a story, her story told through food. As the day of the competition dawned, Malaya felt a mix of excitement and nerves. She had packed her knives, her specially sourced ingredients, and a small photo of her Lola for luck. As she made her way to the Grand Manila Hotel, the enormity of what she was about to do hit her. The hotel lobby was bustling with activity. Chefs from around the world milled about, some looking confident, others as nervous as Malaya felt. As she checked in and received her competitor's badge, Malaya couldn't help but feel out of place among the crisp white jackets and European accents. A tall, imposing man approached her, his chef's whites immaculate and adorned with various pins and medals. "You must be Malaya Santos," he said, his tone condescending. "I must say we were all quite surprised to see a chef from such a quaint establishment on the list." Malaya felt her cheeks burn, but she held her head high. "Cucina may be small, but we serve food made with heart and skill. I'm honored to represent my restaurant and my culture in this competition." The man raised an eyebrow. "Well, best of luck to you. You'll certainly need it." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Malaya feeling small and uncertain. As she made her way to the competitors' area, Malaya overheard snippets of conversation. Chefs were discussing complex techniques, rare ingredients, and Michelin stars. Malaya felt her confidence wavering again. What was she doing here? But then she remembered her mother's words, her Lola's teachings. She touched the photo in her pocket and took a deep breath. She was here because she deserved to be, because she had something unique to offer, because Filipino cuisine deserved a place on the world stage. The competition began with a briefing. The chefs were introduced to the judges, a panel of renowned culinary experts from around the world. Malaya's heart raced as she realized the caliber of the people who would be tasting her food. The first challenge was announced: create a dish that represented their culinary heritage while incorporating modern techniques. Malaya felt a glimmer of hope. This was exactly what she had been preparing for. As the chefs moved to their stations, Malaya could feel the eyes of her competitors on her. She was clearly an outsider, the unknown factor in this group of culinary elite. But as she tied on her apron and surveyed her ingredients, a calm settled over her. This kitchen, any kitchen, was where she belonged. Malaya began to cook, losing herself in the familiar rhythms of chopping, sautéing, and seasoning. She thought of her Lola, of the streets of Manila, of the flavors that had shaped her palate and her passion. As she worked, she could almost reminding her to cook with love. Around her, the kitchen was a flurry of activity. Chefs called out orders to their assistants, the hiss of pressure cookers and the whir of immersion blenders filling the air. But Malaya remained focused, channeling all her energy into her dish. As the time ticked down, Malaya put the finishing touches on her plate. She had created a deconstructed sinigang with a tamarind foam, sous vide pork belly, and a vegetable terrine that captured the essence of the traditional soup while presenting it in a new, visually stunning way. When time was called, Malaya stepped back from her station, her heart pounding. She looked around at the other chefs' creations, each one a work of art. Doubt began to creep in again. How could her dish possibly compare? The judging began. Malaya watched as the panel made their way from station to station, tasting each dish. With thoughtful expressions. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see nods of approval, raised eyebrows of surprise, and occasional frowns of disappointment. Finally, it was Malaya's turn. She presented her dish, explaining the concept and technique behind each element. As the judges tasted, Malaya held her breath, searching their faces for any hint of their thoughts. One judge, a stern-looking woman with graying hair, looked up at Malaya. "This is unexpected," she said. Malaya's heart sank, but then the judge continued, "In the best possible way. You've taken a humble dish and elevated it without losing its soul. Impressive work, young lady." Malaya felt a wave of relief and pride wash over her. She had done it. She had held her own against some of the best chefs in the world. As the judges moved on, Malaya caught the eye of the chef who had dismissed her earlier. He gave her a small nod of grudging respect. Malaya stood a little taller. She might be an outsider, but she had proven she belonged here. The results of the first challenge were announced. Malaya had placed in the top 10, securing her spot in the next round of the competition. As the chefs filed out of the kitchen, several of them approached Malaya, curious about her dish and her background. That night, as Malaya lay in bed in her hotel room, she felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had survived the first day, had even excelled, but she knew the competition would only get tougher from here. As she drifted off to sleep, Malaya's mind was already racing with ideas for the next challenge. She had taken the first step towards her dreams, and she was determined to see this journey through to the end, wherever it might lead her. The next morning, Malaya woke early, her mind already buzzing with anticipation for the day ahead. As she made her way down to the hotel's grand ballroom, now transformed into a state-of-the-art competition kitchen, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The gleaming stainless steel workstations, the rows of professional-grade ovens, and the arsenal of culinary gadgets were a far cry from the modest kitchen at Kusina. Chefs from around the world were filing in, their faces a mix of determination and nerves. Malaya noticed a few familiar faces from the previous day, including the condescending chef who had dismissed her. He caught her eye and gave her a curt nod, which Malaya returned with a small smile. She may have surprised him yesterday, but she knew she still had a long way to go to truly earn his respect and the respect of the other competitors. As Malaya took her place at her assigned station, she overheard snippets of conversation from nearby chefs. They were discussing their training at prestigious culinary schools, their experiences in Michelin-starred restaurants, and the famous chefs they had worked under. Malaya felt a pang of insecurity. Her culinary education had come from her grandmother's kitchen and years of hands-on experience at Kusina. Would it be enough to compete at this level? The head judge, a stern-looking woman named Chef Isabella, called for attention. "Good morning, chefs," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "Today's challenge will test not only your culinary skills, but also your ability to think on your feet." Malaya's heart raced as she listened to the challenge details. They would be given a mystery box of ingredients and just 1 hour to create a dish that showcased their creativity and technical skill. As the boxes were distributed, Malaya took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. When the signal was given to open the boxes, Malaya lifted the lid with trembling hands. Inside, she found an eclectic mix of ingredients: duck breast, lychee, purple yam, bitter melon, and a small vial of saffron. Her mind raced as she tried to envision a dish that could incorporate these disparate elements. Around her, the kitchen erupted into a frenzy of activity. Chefs were firing up stoves, chopping ingredients, and calling out orders to their assistants. She was used to working alone or with just 1 or 2 other cooks, not in this high-pressure, crowded environment. Taking a deep breath, Malaya closed her eyes for a moment, trying to center herself. She thought of her Lola, of the calm, methodical way she approached cooking. "One step at a time, Anak." She could almost hear her grandmother say, "Let the ingredients speak to you." With renewed focus, Malaya began to work. She decided to create a dish that would blend Filipino flavors with French techniques, a fusion that would showcase her heritage while demonstrating her ability to work with unfamiliar ingredients. As she worked, Malaya found herself falling into a rhythm. The sounds of the kitchen faded into the background as she focused on each task, searing the duck breast to perfection, creating a lychee and bitter melon chutney, crafting a silky purple yam puree infused with saffron. Time seemed to fly by, and before she knew it, Chef Isabella was calling out the 5-minute warning. Malaya's heart raced as she rushed to plate her dish, carefully arranging each element for maximum visual impact. As she stepped back from her completed plate, Malaya felt a mix of pride and uncertainty. She had given it her all, but would it be enough? The judging process was intense. Each chef presented their dish to the panel, explaining their concept and techniques. Malaya watched as her competitors presented elaborate creations, their plates looking like works of art. When it was her turn, Malaya took a deep breath and approached the judges' table. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Today, I've prepared for you a pan-seared duck breast with a lychee and bitter melon chutney, served on a bed of saffron-infused purple yam puree." As the judges tasted her dish, Malaya held her breath, searching their faces for any hint of their thoughts. Chef Isabella, her expression unreadable, looked up at Malaya. "Tell me, Chef Santos, what inspired this combination of flavors?" Malaya straightened her shoulders. "I wanted to create a dish that bridged my Filipino heritage with classical French techniques. The bitter melon, or ampalaya, is a staple in Filipino cuisine, but it's often considered an acquired taste. By pairing it with the sweetness of the lychee and the richness of the duck, I hope to make it more approachable while still honoring its place in my culinary tradition." Chef Isabella nodded slowly. "It's an interesting concept. The flavors are well balanced, and your technique with the duck is impressive. However, I wonder if perhaps you played it a bit safe with the presentation. In a competition at this level, we're looking for dishes that push boundaries in every aspect." Malaya felt her heart sink a little at the criticism, but she nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you for your feedback, Chef. I'll certainly take that into consideration for future challenges." As she returned to her station, Malaya's mind was already racing with ideas for how she could elevate her presentation skills. She had held her own in terms of flavor and technique, but it was clear she needed to step up her game if she wanted to stay competitive. The results of the challenge were announced later that afternoon. Malaya had placed in the middle of the pack, not at the top, but not at the bottom either. She had done well enough to continue in the competition, but she knew she would need to push herself even harder in the coming days. As the chefs filed out of the kitchen, Malaya found herself walking alongside a young chef from Japan, Hiroshi, who had been stationed next to her during the challenge. "Your dish was very interesting," Hiroshi said, his English slightly accented but clear. "I've never tasted bitter melon prepared that way before." Malaya smiled, pleased by the compliment. "Thank you. Your dish was beautiful. The plating was so elegant." Hiroshi nodded in thanks. "I trained in Kyoto for many years, focusing on the art of presentation. Perhaps we could exchange some ideas. I'd love to learn more about Filipino cuisine." Malaya felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was why she had entered the competition, not just to prove herself, but to share her culinary heritage with the world. "I'd like that," she said. "Maybe we could grab coffee tomorrow morning before the next challenge." As they exchanged contact information, Malaya felt a renewed sense of purpose. She may not have the same formal training as many of her competitors, but she had something unique to offer. Her challenge now was to find a way to showcase that uniqueness while also elevating her skills to match the high standards of the competition. That evening, as Malaya lay in bed reviewing the day's events, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Mr. Reyes, back at Cucina. "Saw you on the competition live stream today," the message read. "The whole restaurant is rooting for you. Remember, you're not just cooking. Make us proud, Malaya." Malaya felt a lump form in her throat. Mr. Reyes was right. She wasn't just here for herself. She was here for Cucina, for her family, for every Filipino chef who had never had the opportunity to showcase their skills on a global stage. With renewed determination, Malaya opened her notebook and began to sketch out ideas for the next challenge. She would need to find a way to balance her respect for traditional Filipino flavors with the innovation and flair the judges were looking for. It would be a difficult line to walk, but Malaya was ready for the challenge. As she drifted off to sleep, Malaya's mind was filled with visions of colorful plates, innovative techniques, and flavors that told the story of her culinary journey. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was ready to face them head-on. The next morning, Malaya met Hiroshi in the hotel lobby. Over steaming cups of coffee, they exchanged stories about their culinary backgrounds and discussed the previous day's challenge. "I was impressed by your use of the bitter melon," Hiroshi said. "In Japan, we have a similar vegetable called goya. It's popular in Okinawan cuisine." Malaya's eyes lit up. "Really? Really? I'd love to learn more about that. Do you think there's a way we could incorporate elements of both our cuisines into future challenges? As they brainstormed ideas, Malaya felt a spark of excitement. This was what she had hoped for when she entered the competition, the chance to learn from and collaborate with chefs from around the world. Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the hotel's PA system, calling all competitors to the ballroom. Malaya and Hiroshi exchanged determined looks as they made their way to the competition area. The ballroom was buzzing with nervous energy as the chefs took their places. Chef Isabella stepped forward, her presence immediately commanding attention. "Good morning, chefs," she began. "Today's challenge will test not only your culinary skills, but also your ability to work under pressure. You will be cooking for a surprise guest judge, a renowned figure in the culinary world. You have 2 hours to create a 3-course meal that showcases your unique culinary perspective." Malaya's mind raced. A 3-course meal in 2 hours was a daunting task, but it was also an opportunity to tell a complete story through her food. As she listened to the rest of the instructions, she began to formulate a plan. When the clock started, Malaya sprang into action. She decided to create a menu that would take the judges on a journey through the Philippines, showcasing different regions and cooking techniques. For the appetizer, she chose to make a modern take on kinilaw, a Filipino ceviche-like dish. She carefully sliced fresh tuna, marinating it in a mixture of calamansi juice, coconut vinegar and ginger. To add a creative twist, she prepared a coconut foam and mango spheres, using molecular gastronomy techniques she had been practicing. The main course would be her interpretation of kare kare, a rich peanut stew traditionally made with oxtail. Malaya opted for a sous vide beef short rib to ensure tender meat in the limited cooking time. She prepared a smooth peanut sauce, infusing it with annatto oil for a vibrant color, and paired it with baby bok choy and crispy garlic chips. For dessert, Malaya decided to elevate the humble bibingka, a rice cake traditionally cooked in banana leaves. She prepared a bibingka souffle, incorporating salted duck egg and queso de bola for authentic flavors, and paired it with a coconut caramel sauce and latik, toasted coconut curds, for texture. As she worked, Malaya could feel the eyes of the other competitors on her. Her techniques were a blend of traditional methods and modern gastronomy, and she could see the curiosity in their glances. Even the condescending chef from the first day seemed intrigued by her coconut foam technique. With 15 minutes left on the clock, Malaya began plating her dishes. She had practiced her plating skills relentlessly since the previous challenge, determined to create visually stunning presentations that would match the complexity of her flavors. As time was called, Malaya stepped back from her station, her heart pounding. She had given it her all, pushing herself to create dishes that were both innovative and true to her culinary heritage. The judging process was intense. Each chef presented their 3-course meal to the panel, which now included the surprise guest judge, a world-renowned chef known for his fusion cuisine. When it was Malaya's turn, she took a deep breath and approached the judges' table. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice clear and confident. "Today, I've prepared a culinary journey through the Philippines, showcasing traditional flavors with modern techniques." As she presented each course, Malaya explained the inspiration behind the dishes. She watched nervously as the judges tasted each dish, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the guest judge looked up at her. "Chef Santos," he said, "your dishes tell a beautiful story. I can taste the passion and the heritage in every bite. The kinilaw is a delightful start, with the coconut foam adding a modern touch without overpowering the fresh fish. Your kare kare is rich and complex, with the sous vide beef cooked to perfection. And the bibingka souffle? Absolutely. Inspired, you've managed to take a humble street food and elevate it to fine dining status without losing its soul." Malaya felt a wave of relief and pride wash over her. Chef Isabella nodded in agreement. "I'm impressed by how much you've grown since the last challenge, Chef Santos. Your plating has improved significantly, and your flavors are bold and well-balanced. Well done." As Malaya returned to her station, she caught the eye of the once condescending chef. He gave her a nod of respect, which Malaya returned with a small smile. She had proven herself herself not just to the judges, but to her fellow competitors as well. The results of the challenge were announced later that evening. Malaya had placed in the top 5, securing her spot in the next round and earning praise from both the judges and her fellow chefs. As the competitors mingled after the announcement, several chefs approached Malaya, curious about her techniques and the flavors she had used. She found herself engaged in animated discussions about Filipino cuisine, exchanging ideas and techniques with chefs from around the world. Hiroshi sought her out, a grin on his face. "Congratulations, Malaya," he said. "Your dishes were incredible. I think you've opened a lot of eyes to the potential of Filipino cuisine." Malaya felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was why she had entered the competition, not just to prove herself, but to share her culinary heritage with the world. "Thank you, Hiroshi," she said. "I'm just getting started." As she made her way back to her hotel room that night, Malaya's phone buzzed with messages of congratulations from Mr. Reyes and the staff at Cucina. She felt a surge of gratitude for their support and a renewed determination to make them proud. Malaya fell asleep that night with a smile on her face, dreaming of the dishes she would create in the challenges to come. She had taken a big step forward today, but she knew the competition would only get tougher from here. But for the first time since arriving at the Grand Manila Hotel, Malaya felt truly confident that she belonged here, ready to show the world the best of Filipino cuisine. As the competition progressed, Malaya found herself facing increasingly difficult challenges. Each day brought new tests of her skills, creativity, and resilience. She was pushed to her limits, working with unfamiliar ingredients, mastering new techniques, and competing against some of the most talented chefs in the world. One particularly grueling challenge required the chefs to create a 7-course tasting menu in just 5 hours. Malaya's hands shook as she planned her menu, knowing that every dish had to be perfect. She decided to showcase the diversity of Filipino cuisine, drawing inspiration from different regions and incorporating both traditional and modern techniques. As she worked, Malaya could feel the pressure mounting. The kitchen was a cacophony of sizzling pans, chopping knives, and shouted orders. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she raced against the clock, her mind constantly calculating timing and temperatures. Midway through the challenge, disaster struck. As Malaya was transferring a tray of delicate puffed rice crisps for her dessert course, she stumbled, sending the crisps scattering across the floor. For a moment, she froze, panic threatening to overwhelm her. But then she heard her Lola's voice in her head, calm and reassuring. "Breathe, anak. There's always a solution if you stay calm and think." Taking a deep breath, Malaya quickly assessed her options. She didn't have time to remake the crisps from scratch, but perhaps she could repurpose another element of her dish. With renewed determination, she set to work, transforming her dessert concept on the fly. As time was called, Malaya stepped back from her station, exhausted but proud. She had managed to pull together 7 courses that told a cohesive story of Filipino cuisine, from a amuse-bouche of adobo spice chicharron to a reimagined halo for dessert. The judging was intense. Chef Isabella and the guest judges meticulously tasted each course, their faces unreadable. Malaya's heart raced as she presented her dishes, explaining the inspiration and techniques behind each one. When she reached her dessert course, Malaya took a deep breath. "For my final course, I present a deconstructed halo. I had originally planned to include puffed rice crisps, but due to an accident, I had to adapt. Instead, I've created tapioca pudding topped with oob ice cream, macapuno strips, and a leche flan foam." Chef Isabella raised an eyebrow. "An interesting adaptation, Chef Santos. Let's see how it tastes." As the judges sampled her dessert, Malaya held her breath. Finally, Chef Isabella looked up. "Chef Santos, your ability to think on your feet is commendable. This dessert is not only delicious, but shows a deep understanding of flavor balance and textural contrast. Well done." Malaya felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had turned a potential disaster into a triumph. As the competition continued, Malaya found herself gaining confidence with each challenge. She was no longer intimidated by the other chefs' prestigious backgrounds or advanced techniques. Instead, she focused on what made her unique, her deep connection to Filipino flavors and her ability to blend tradition with innovation. One day, as Malaya was preparing for the next challenge, she overheard a conversation conversation between two of her fellow competitors. They were discussing her, their tones a mix of admiration and frustration. "I don't get it," one chef said. "She doesn't have the same training as us, but somehow she keeps impressing the judges." The other chef shrugged. "It's her flavors. They're unlike anything I've tasted before. And did you see how she handled that mishap in the last challenge? She's got real talent." Malaya felt a surge of pride at their words. She had earned their respect through her hard work and creativity. As the competition entered its final stages, the challenges became even more intense. The chefs were pushed to their limits, working with exotic ingredients, creating elaborate plating designs, and mastering advanced cooking techniques. One challenge required the chefs to create a dish inspired by a work of art. Malaya chose a vibrant painting by Filipino artist Fernando Amorsolo, known for his portrayal of rural Philippine landscapes. She crafted a dish that captured the colors and textures of the painting, using local ingredients to tell a story of Philippine agriculture and cuisine. Her dish, a symphony of colors and flavors, impressed both the judges and her fellow competitors. Chef Isabella praised her creativity and technique, while the guest judge, a renowned food critic, declared it one of the most visually stunning dishes he had ever seen. As Malaya progressed through the competition, she began to attract attention from the media. Journalists were intrigued by her story. The underdog chef from a small restaurant who was holding her own against classically trained chefs from Michelin-starred establishments. One evening, after a particularly grueling challenge, a reporter approached Malaya for an interview. "Chef Santos," the reporter began, "you've become quite the sensation in this competition. How does it feel to be representing Filipino cuisine on such a prestigious stage?" Malaya considered the question carefully. "It's an incredible honor," she said. "Filipino cuisine is so rich and diverse, but it's often overlooked in the world of fine dining. I'm grateful for the opportunity to showcase our flavors and techniques to a global audience. And how do you think your background, coming from a small local restaurant rather than a high-end establishment, has influenced your approach to the competition?" the reporter pressed. Malaya smiled. "I think it's given me a unique perspective. At Cucina, we focus on creating delicious food with humble ingredients. That's taught me to be creative, to find ways to elevate simple dishes. In this competition, I'm combining those skills with the new techniques I'm learning to create something truly unique." As the interview concluded, Malaya felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just competing for herself anymore. She was representing her culture, her country, and every chef who had ever been underestimated. The next day brought a new challenge, one that would test the chef's ability to work under extreme pressure. They were tasked with creating a 3-course meal for a group of VIP guests, including several Michelin-starred chefs and influential food critics. As Malaya began to plan her menu, she felt a familiar wave of self-doubt creeping in. These guests were used to dining at the world's best restaurants. How could her food possibly impress them? But then she remembered all she had accomplished so far in the competition. She had earned her place here. Her food, with its unique flavors and innovative presentations, had consistently impressed the judges. She took a deep breath and focused on creating a menu that would showcase the best of her abilities. For her appetizer, Malaya decided to create a modern take on kilawin, a traditional Filipino ceviche-like dish. She carefully sliced fresh tuna, marinating it in a mixture of calamansi juice, coconut vinegar, and ginger. To add a creative twist, she prepared a coconut foam and mango spheres using in the competition. Her main course was a reinterpretation of kare kare, a rich peanut stew traditionally made with oxtail. Malaya opted for a sous vide beef short rib to ensure tender meat, paired with a smooth peanut sauce infused with annatto oil for a vibrant color. She accompanied it with baby bok choy and crispy garlic chips for texture. For dessert, Malaya decided to elevate the humble bibingka, a rice cake traditionally cooked in banana leaves. She prepared a bibingka souffle, incorporating salted duck, egg and queso de bola for authentic flavors, and paired it with a coconut caramel sauce and latique, toasted coconut curds, for texture. As she cooked, Malaya could feel the eyes of the VIP guests on her. They moved from station to station, observing. The chefs at work. Malaya forced forced herself to focus on her tasks, blocking out the pressure of their scrutiny. When it came time to serve, Malaya's hands shook slightly as she plated her dishes, but as she looked down at her creations, she felt a surge of pride. These dishes represented everything she had learned and accomplished throughout the competition. The guests sampled each chef's creations in turn, their expressions unreadable. Malaya watched nervously as they tasted her dishes, straining to hear any comments they might make. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the guests finished their meals and the chefs were called before them for feedback. One of the Michelin-starred chefs spoke first. "Chef Santos," he began, and Malaya held her breath. "Your dishes were a revelation. The kilawin was a perfect balance of acidity and freshness, with the coconut foam adding a clever modern touch. Your kare kare showed a mastery of technique while staying true to the essence of the dish, and the bibinka soufflé truly inspired. You've managed to elevate traditional flavors to a world-class level." Malaya felt tears pricking at her eyes as the other guests nodded in agreement. A renowned food critic added, "I've had the pleasure of dining at some of the best restaurants in the world, but I can honestly say I've never tasted anything quite like your food, Chef Santos. You've opened my eyes to the potential of Filipino cuisine." As Malaya returned to her station, she felt a mix of elation and disbelief. She had not only held her own against some of the most talented chefs in the competition, but she had actually impressed these culinary world leaders with her unique approach to Filipino cuisine. The results of the challenge were announced later. That evening, Malaya had placed first, earning high praise from both the judges and the VIP guests. As Chef Isabella announced her win, Malaya felt a surge of emotion. All her hard work, all the long hours of practice and study had led to this moment. As the other chefs congratulated her, Malaya caught sight of Hiroshi beaming with pride. He made his way over to her, enveloping her in a warm hug. "You did it, Malaya," he said. "You showed them all what Filipino cuisine can be." Malaya smiled through her tears. "We did it," she corrected him. "I couldn't have gotten this far without your support and friendship." That night, as Malaya lay in bed, her mind raced with the events of the day. She thought about how far she had come since that first day in the competition, when she had felt so out of place among the other chefs. Now she had earned their respect and admiration, but more than that, she had proven to herself that she belonged here. Her unique perspective, her deep connection to her culinary heritage, and her willingness to push boundaries and try new things had set her apart in this competition. As she drifted off to sleep, Malaya felt a sense of calm determination settle over her. There were still more challenges to come, but she was ready to face them. She had found her voice as a chef, and she was eager to see where it would take her next. The next morning, as Malaya made her way to the competition kitchen, she was greeted by a flurry of activity. Camera crews were setting up, and there was an air of excitement among the staff and remaining competitors. Chef Isabella gathered the chefs together, her expression serious. "Today's challenge," she announced, "will be unlike anything you've faced so far. You will be cooking not just for our panel of judges, but for a live audience and television viewers across the country." Malaya felt her heart rate quicken. A live audience, television viewers. The stakes had just been raised significantly. "You will each have 2 hours to create a signature dish that represents your journey in this competition," Chef Isabella continued. "This dish should showcase your culinary point of view and demonstrate how you've grown as a chef during your time here." As the chefs moved to their stations, Malaya's mind raced. How could she encapsulate her entire journey in a single dish? She thought back to all the challenges she had faced and all the flavors she had explored. Suddenly, an idea began to form. Malaya would create a dish that blended the traditional flavors of her childhood with the advanced techniques she had mastered during the competition. It would be a bridge between her past and her future as a chef. As the clock started, Malaya set to work with focused intensity. She began by preparing a base of aromatic rice, infused with pandan leaves and coconut milk. This would be a nod to the comfort foods of her youth. Next, she turned her attention to the protein. Malaya decided on a sous vide duck breast, a technique she had perfected during the competition. She prepared a marinade of soy sauce, calamansi juice, and garlic, allowing the flavors to penetrate the meat slowly and evenly. For a sauce, Malaya created a modern take take on the classic Filipino adobo. She reduced chicken stock with vinegar, soy sauce, and bay leaves, then mounted it with butter for a silky texture. To add a touch of molecular gastronomy, she created small spheres of intense adobo flavor using a reverse spherification technique. As a vegetable component, Malaya prepared baby bok choy 2 ways. Some quickly stir-fried for freshness, and some dehydrated and crushed into a powder for a burst of concentrated flavor and interesting texture. Finally, for a dramatic presentation element, Malaya used the liquid nitrogen she had become comfortable with during the competition to create a pandan-flavored snow that would melt tableside, releasing its aroma. As she worked, Malaya was acutely aware of the cameras capturing her every move, of the live audience watching from the sidelines. But rather than feeling nervous, she felt energized by their presence. This was her chance to share her culinary vision with the world. With just minutes to go, Malaya began plating her dish. She placed a mound of the fragrant rice in the center of a sleek black plate. The perfectly cooked duck breast, sliced to show its rosy interior, was arranged on top. She dotted the plate with the adobo spheres and artfully placed the bok choy preparations around the dish. Just before time was called, Malaya carefully spooned the pandan snow around the edge of the plate, where it began to sublimate, releasing wisps of aromatic vapor. As Malaya stepped back from her finished dish, she felt a sense of pride, unlike anything she had experienced before. This plate represented everything she had learned and everything she hoped to achieve as a chef. The judging process was intense. Each chef presented their dish to the panel and the audience, explaining their inspiration and techniques. When it was Malaya's turn, she took a deep breath and approached the judges' table. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and confident. "Today I present to you a dish I call Roots and Wings. It represents my culinary journey from the flavors of my childhood to the techniques I've mastered in this competition." As she explained each component of her dish, Malaya could see the judges' eyes light up with interest. When she finished her presentation, Chef Isabella was the first to speak. "Chef Santos," she said, her tone serious, "when you first entered this competition, I wondered if you had the skills to compete at this level. You've not only proven that you belong here, but you've shown us all a new way of looking at Filipino cuisine. This dish is a perfect encapsulation of your journey. It's technically brilliant, beautifully presented, and most importantly, absolutely delicious." The other judges nodded in agreement, each offering their own words of praise. As Malaya returned to her station, she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had done it. She had created a dish that truly represented who she was as a chef. As the judges deliberated, Malaya found herself surrounded by her fellow competitors. Even those who had initially dismissed her were now offering congratulations and asking about her techniques. She had earned their respect, not just as a competitor, but as a peer. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Chef Isabella called the chefs forward for the results. Malaya's heart pounded as she took her place in line. After much deliberation, Chef Isabella began. "We have reached a decision. The chef who has shown the most growth, creativity, and skill throughout this competition, and who has truly elevated their cuisine to a world-class level, is..." Malaya held her breath. "Chef Malaya Santos." For a moment, Malaya couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had won. She, Malaya Santos, the chef from a small local restaurant with no formal training, had won one of the most prestigious culinary competitions in the world. As her fellow chefs embraced her and the audience erupted in applause, Malaya felt a sense of joy and accomplishment unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had not only proven herself as a chef, but she had also brought Filipino cuisine. As she stepped forward to accept her award, Malaya caught sight of Mr. Reyes in the audience, tears of pride in his eyes. She thought of her Lola, of all the hours spent in the kitchen learning the basics of Filipino cooking. She thought of her journey from Cocina to this moment, and she knew that this was just the beginning. Malaya Santos, the underdog chef from Manila, had found her place in the culinary world, and she was ready to soar. The days following Malaya's victory were a whirlwind of interviews, photo shoots, and congratulatory messages. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications from social media, where food enthusiasts and aspiring chefs praised her innovative approach to Filipino Filipino cuisine. Local news outlets hailed her as a culinary ambassador, celebrating how she had brought Filipino flavors to the global stage. Amidst the chaos, Malaya found herself in a daze, still processing the magnitude of her achievement. She had entered the competition hoping to prove herself and showcase her beloved Filipino cuisine. Now, she stood at the precipice of a new chapter. In her culinary career, opportunities stretching out before her like an endless buffet. On the morning after the finale, Malaya sat in her hotel room, sipping coffee and scrolling through the flood of messages on her phone. A knock at the door startled her from her reverie. "Come in," she called, expecting perhaps a hotel staff member or one of her fellow competitors coming to say goodbye. To her surprise, it was Chef Isabella who entered, her usual stern expression softened by a hint of a smile. "Good morning, Chef Santos," she said, taking a seat across from Malaya. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Malaya shook her head, still somewhat in awe of the formidable judge. "Not at all, Chef. What can I do for you?" Chef Isabella leaned forward, her gaze intense. "I wanted to speak with you privately before the official press conference later today. Your performance in this competition has been nothing short of remarkable, Malaya. You've shown not only exceptional skill and creativity, but also a deep understanding of your culinary heritage." Malaya felt a flush of pride at the praise. "Thank you, Chef. That means a lot coming from you. I'm not here just to offer congratulations," Chef Isabella continued. "I have a proposition for you. As you know, winning this competition comes with a substantial cash prize and the opportunity to stage at some of the world's top restaurants. But I believe you have the potential to do something even more impactful." Malaya leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I'm offering you the position of executive chef at a new restaurant I'm opening here in Manila," Chef Isabella said. "It will be a fine dining establishment focused on elevating Southeast Asian cuisines, with a particular emphasis on Filipino flavors. I believe you're the perfect chef to lead this project." Malaya's mind reeled. An executive chef position at a high-end restaurant? It was beyond anything she had dared to dream. I don't know what to say," Malaya stammered. "It's an incredible opportunity, but I'm not sure I'm ready for such a responsibility." Chef Isabella's expression softened further. "Malaya, you've more than proven your capabilities in this competition. You have a unique voice as a chef, and I believe you can bring something truly special to the culinary scene. Take some time to think about it. We can discuss the details after the press conference." As Chef Isabella left, Malaya sat back, her head spinning. The offer was tempting, a chance to continue pushing the boundaries of Filipino cuisine and to work alongside one of the most respected chefs in the industry. But a part of her hesitated. What about Cucina? What about Mr. Reyes and her colleagues who had supported her throughout this journey? Malaya's thoughts were interrupted by another knock at the door. This time it was Mr. Reyes himself, his face beaming with pride. "Malaya, my dear," he exclaimed, enveloping her in a warm hug. "I'm so proud of you. You've done Cucina proud. You've done the Philippines proud." As they sat down, Malaya felt a lump form in her throat. "Mr. Reyes, I can't thank you enough for your support. I wouldn't be here without you and everyone at Cucina." Mr. Reyes waved off her thanks. "Nonsense. This is all you, Malaya. Your talent, your hard work, your passion. We just gave you a kitchen to start in." Malaya took a deep breath, deciding to confide in her mentor. "Mr. Reyes, Chef Isabella just offered me a position as executive chef at a new fine dining restaurant. She's opening." She watched his face carefully, expecting to see disappointment or hurt. Instead, his smile grew even wider. "That's wonderful news, Malaya. What an incredible opportunity." Malaya blinked in surprise. "You're not upset? I mean, I was hoping to come back to Cucina to use what I've learned to help the restaurant grow." Mr. Reyes reached out. "Malaya, when I promoted you to sous chef, I knew it was just the beginning for you. Cucina has been your starting point, but your talent deserves a bigger stage. This is your chance to truly make your mark on the culinary world." Tears welled up in Malaya's eyes. "But what about Cucina? I can't just abandon you and the team." "Who said anything about abandoning us?" Mr. Reyes chuckled. "Malaya, your success is Cucina's success. Think of all the attention our little restaurant will get as the place where the great chef Malaya Santos started her career. And who knows, maybe we can collaborate in the future, do some special events together." As Mr. Reyes's words sank in, Malaya felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had been so focused on not letting anyone down that she hadn't considered how her success could benefit everyone who had supported her. "Thank you, Mr. Reyes," she said, wiping away a tear. "Your support means everything to me." As Mr. Mr. Reyes. Left to let her prepare for the press conference, Malaya's mind was made up. She would accept Chef Isabella's offer. It was time to take the next step in her culinary journey. The press conference was a blur of flashing cameras and rapid fire questions. Malaya, seated at a long table with the other finalists and judges, found herself the center of attention. Journalists clamored for details about her background, her inspirations, and her plans for the future. When asked about her next steps, Malaya took a deep breath and made her announcement. "I'm honored to share that I've accepted a position as executive chef at a new restaurant here in Manila, focusing on elevated Southeast Asian cuisine. I'm excited to continue exploring and innovating with Filipino flavors and to help put our cuisine on the global culinary map." The room erupted in excited chatter, and Malaya caught Chef Isabella's approving nod from the corner of her eye. As the conference wound down, Malaya felt a mix of excitement and nervousness about the road ahead. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Malaya prepared for her new role. She spent long hours with Chef Isabella, discussing menu, concepts, kitchen layouts, and staffing. They traveled together, visiting markets and farms across the Philippines to source the finest local ingredients and meet with producers. As word spread about the new restaurant, Malaya found herself inundated with applications from chefs eager to work with her. She was determined to build a diverse team that shared her passion for Filipino cuisine and her commitment to innovation. One afternoon, as Malaya was reviewing resumes in the half-finished restaurant space, she received an unexpected visitor. It was the chef who had initially dismissed her at the beginning of the competition, the one who had seemed so condescending. "Chef Santos," he said, his tone respectful. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Malaya gestured for him to sit. "Not at all. What can I do for you, Chef Laurent?" The French chef seemed uncomfortable, fidgeting with his hat. "I wanted to apologize," he said finally. "When we first met, I made assumptions about you based on your background. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Malaya was taken aback by his honesty. "Thank you, chef. I appreciate that. I also wanted to ask," he continued, "if you might consider me for a position in your kitchen. I know it might seem strange given our history, but I've been deeply impressed by your approach to cuisine. I believe I could learn a great deal from you and perhaps offer some of my own expertise in return." Malaya considered his words carefully. Part of her wanted to reject him outright, to savor the reversal of their initial positions. But she thought back to her own journey, to the chefs who had given her a chance, despite her unconventional background. "Chef Laurent," she said finally, "I appreciate your honesty. I believe in building a kitchen where everyone, regardless of their background, has the opportunity to learn and grow. If you're willing to approach our cuisine with an open mind and respect for its heritage, I'd be happy to consider your application." The relief on Chef Laurent's face was palpable. As he left, promising to submit his formal application, Malaya felt a sense of satisfaction. She was in a position now to shape not just menus, but the very culture of a kitchen. She was determined to create an environment of mutual respect and continuous learning, where chefs from all backgrounds could thrive. As the opening day of the restaurant approached, Malaya found herself working around the clock. There were menus to finalize, staff to train, and countless details to oversee. Despite the long hours and high pressure, she felt energized by the challenge. The night before the grand opening, Malaya stood alone in the gleaming new kitchen. She ran her hand along the smooth stainless steel counters, marveling at the state-of-the-art equipment that surrounded the modest kitchen at Kusina, where she had started her journey. As she stood there, Malaya closed her eyes and thought of her Lola. She could almost smell the aroma of sinigang simmering on the stove, could almost hear her grandmother's gentle instruction. "Cook with love, anak," she used to say. "That's the secret ingredient that no recipe can teach you." Malaya opened her eyes, a sense of calm settling over her. Yes, this kitchen was different from her Lola's, from Kusina's, but the essence of what made her food special, the love and respect for her culinary heritage, that remained the same. She was ready. The opening night was a resounding success. Food critics, celebrities, and culinary enthusiasts packed the restaurant, eager to taste Malaya's innovative take on Filipino and Southeast Asian cuisines. As plate after plate left the kitchen, Malaya could hear the excited murmurs and exclamations of delight from the dining room. Her menu was a carefully crafted journey through the flavors of the Philippines and its neighbors. There was a deconstructed sinigang, the traditional sour soup reimagined as a delicate consommé with spherified tamarind bursts and sous vide pork belly. Her kare kare, typically a humble stew, was elevated with wagyu beef cheeks and a peanut sauce enriched with bone marrow. For dessert, Malaya had created a show-stopping halo-inspired dish. It featured a variety of house-made jellies and preserves, a oob ice cream made tableside with liquid nitrogen, and a delicate lattice of caramelized sugar that shattered dramatically when broken with a spoon. As the last desserts were served and the kitchen began to wind down, Chef Isabella entered, her face glowing with pride. "Malaya," she said, "you've outdone yourself. The critics are raving, and I've never seen so many clean plates come back to the kitchen. You should be very proud." Malaya beamed, the exhaustion of the long day melting away in the face of such praise. "Thank you, Chef. I couldn't have done it without this amazing team." As if on cue, the kitchen erupted in cheers and applause. Malaya looked around at her staff, seeing the pride and excitement on their faces. This was more than just a successful service. It was the beginning of something special. In the weeks that followed, the restaurant became the talk of the town. Reservations were booked months in advance, and food critics penned glowing reviews, praising Malaya's innovative approach to Filipino cuisine. But for Malaya, the most meaningful feedback came from the local diners, especially the older generation. One evening, an elderly woman asked to speak with the chef. Malaya approached her table, curious about what she might say. "Chef," the woman began, her eyes glistening with tears, "I wanted to thank you. Your food, it reminds me of my childhood, of my own Lola's cooking, but it's also something entirely new. You've made me proud to be Filipino, proud of our food." Malaya felt a lump form in her throat. This, she realized, was why she cooked. Not for the accolades or the reviews, but to touch people's hearts through food, to honor her heritage while pushing it forward. As the months passed, Malaya continued to innovate and experiment. She introduced a tasting menu that changed with the seasons, highlighting the best of Filipino produce. She collaborated with local farmers and producers, showcasing their ingredients and helping to elevate the entire Filipino food ecosystem. One day, as Malaya was experimenting with a new dish in the kitchen, she received an unexpected call. It was from a representative of the James Beard Foundation, informing her that she had been nominated for Rising Star Chef of the Year. As she hung up the phone, stunned by the news, Malaya's mind raced back to where her journey had begun. From the humble kitchen of Cucina to a nomination for one of the most prestigious awards in the culinary world, it had been an incredible ride. That evening, after service, Malaya gathered her team. "I have some news to share," she began, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've been nominated for the James Beard Rising Star Chef Award." The kitchen erupted in cheers and congratulations. As Malaya looked around at the beaming faces of her staff, she felt a wave of gratitude. "This nomination," she continued, "it's not just for me. It's for all of us, for every chef who's working to elevate Filipino cuisine, for every farmer and producer who's providing us with incredible ingredients. And it's for every Lola and Nanay who passed down their recipes and techniques, keeping our culinary heritage alive." In the weeks leading up to the award ceremony, Malaya threw herself into her work with renewed vigor. She was determined to continue pushing boundaries, to keep learning and growing as a chef. The night of the James Beard Awards arrived, and Malaya found herself in New York, seated among the culinary elite as the Rising Star Chef, squeezing the hand of Chef Isabella, who had accompanied her. And the Rising Star Chef of the Year is Malaya Santos. For a moment, Malaya couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She had won. As the audience applauded, she made her way to the stage, her mind a whirl of emotion. Standing at the podium, clutching her award, Malaya took a deep breath. "This award is a tremendous honor," she began, her voice shaky but growing stronger. "But it's not just mine. It belongs to every chef who's working to bring Filipino cuisine to the world stage. It belongs to the farmers and producers who provide us with incredible ingredients. It belongs to my team who push me to be better every day." She paused, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "Most of all, this award is for my Lola, who first taught me that cooking is an act of love. And it's for every Filipino, whether in the Philippines or in the diaspora, who has ever felt that their cuisine was just home cooking or street food. Our flavors, our techniques, our culinary heritage, they deserve to be celebrated on the world stage. This award is a step towards that recognition, and I'm honored to play a part in that journey. As Malaya left the stage to resounding applause, she felt a sense of both accomplishment and responsibility. She had achieved more than she had ever dreamed possible, but she knew this was just the beginning. There was still so much to explore, so many flavors to showcase, so many boundaries to push. Back in Manila, Malaya's win was celebrated as a victory for Filipino cuisine as a whole. She was invited to speak at culinary schools, asked to collaborate with other chefs, and featured in magazines and TV shows. Through it all, she remained grounded, never forgetting where she came from. One sunny afternoon, Malaya found herself back at Cucina, the small restaurant where her journey had begun. Mr. Reyes welcomed her with open arms, proud tears in his eyes. "Look at you," he said, gesturing to the framed magazine covers and awards that now adorned Cucina's walls, all featuring Malaya. "From our little kitchen to the top of the culinary world." Malaya smiled, feeling a wave of nostalgia as she looked around the familiar space. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mr. Reyes. Without Cucina, this will always be home." As they sat down to share a meal, Malaya realized that while her life had changed dramatically, the essence of who she was as a chef remained the same. She was still that girl who found joy in the sizzle of garlic hitting hot oil, who saw magic in the transformation of humble ingredients into something extraordinary. Malaya Santos, the underdog chef from a small Manila restaurant, had become a culinary star. But more importantly, she had become a beacon for Filipino cuisine, helping to bring the flavors she loved to a global audience. As she sat in Cucina, enjoying the familiar tastes of home, Malaya knew that her culinary journey was far from over. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where she could use her platform to elevate not just her own career, but the entire landscape of Filipino cuisine. As Malaya savored her meal with Mr. Reyes, her mind was already racing with new ideas. She thought about the young chefs she could mentor, the local ingredients she could showcase, the traditional techniques she could preserve and modernize. There was so much more to explore, so many more stories to tell through food. "Mr. Reyes," she said, setting down her spoon, "I've been thinking, how would you feel about collaborating on a project?" Mr. Reyes raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" "I was thinking we could start a culinary scholarship program," Malaya explained, her excitement growing as she spoke. "We could identify talented young chefs from underprivileged backgrounds, give them the opportunity to train in top kitchens, both here and abroad. We could help them the way you helped me." Mr. Reyes's face lit up. "Malaya, that's a wonderful idea. Imagine the impact we could have, the talent we could nurture." As they discussed the details, Malaya felt a renewed sense of purpose. Yes, she had achieved her dreams, but now she had the power to help others achieve theirs. She could be a bridge between the humble kitchens where she started and the world-class restaurants she now inhabited. In the months that followed, Malaya threw herself into this new project with the same passion she brought to her cooking. She reached out to her contacts in the culinary world, securing internships and training opportunities. She worked with local culinary schools to identify promising students who lacked the resources to further their education. The Cucina Culinary Scholarship Program, as they named it, quickly gained traction. Chefs and restaurateurs from around the world, impressed by Malaya's vision, offered their support. Soon they were sending promising young Filipino chefs in Paris, New York, and Tokyo. But Malaya didn't stop there. She organized culinary workshops and masterclasses, inviting renowned chefs to share their knowledge with local cooks. She worked with agricultural organizations to promote sustainable farming practices and preserve heirloom varieties of Filipino produce. One day, as Malaya was overseeing a pop-up event featuring the first batch of scholarship recipients, she received news that left her speechless. The prestigious World's 50 Best Restaurants had ranked her restaurant in the top 10, the highest placement ever for a Filipino establishment. As she shared the news with her team, Malaya felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond personal achievement. This recognition wasn't just for her or her restaurant, it was a validation of Filipino cuisine on the world stage. That evening, after the successful pop-up, Malaya found a quiet moment to call her mother. As she shared the news of the ranking, her mother's proud tears were audible even through the phone. "Your Lola would be so proud, Anak," her mother said. said, her voice thick with emotion. You've taken the flavors of her kitchen and shared them with the world. As Malaya hung up the phone, she felt a familiar presence, as if her Lola was right there with her. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice. Remember, Malaya, no matter how fancy the kitchen, no matter how prestigious the award, the most important ingredient is always love. Malaya smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She had come so far from that little girl watching her Lola in the kitchen, but in the ways that truly mattered, she hadn't changed at all. She was still cooking with love, still honoring her heritage, still finding joy in feeding people. As she looked out over the Manila skyline, Malaya felt a sense of excitement for what the future held. There were still so many flavors to explore, so many techniques to master, so many young chefs to mentor. Her journey, she realized, was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. With renewed energy, Malaya turned back to her kitchen. There was work to be done, flavors to be created, and a culinary legacy to build, and she was ready for every moment of it. As Malaya's reputation grew, so did the demands on her time. She found herself juggling her responsibilities at the restaurant with speaking engagements, culinary demonstrations, and media appearances. Her innovative approach to Filipino cuisine had caught the attention of food enthusiasts worldwide, and invitations poured in from culinary festivals and conferences across the globe. One particularly hectic week, Malaya found herself flying from Manila to New York for a guest appearance on a popular cooking show, then jetting off to Paris for a collaborative dinner with a Michelin-starred chef before finally returning home for the launch of a new seasonal menu at her restaurant. The whirlwind of activity was exhilarating but also exhausting. As she settled back into her kitchen in Manila, Malaya felt a familiar sense of comfort wash over her. No matter how far she traveled or how prestigious the events she attended, this kitchen, with its familiar sights, sounds, and smells, would always be home. Her sous chef, Elena, approached with a concerned look. Chef, are you sure you don't need to rest? You've been going non-stop for weeks. Malaya smiled, touched by Elena's concern. I'm fine, really. Being back in the kitchen energizes me. Now, let's go over the new menu items for tonight. As they discussed the evening service, Malaya couldn't help but reflect on how far she'd come. Eleanor had been one of the first chefs she'd hired when opening the restaurant, a young talent with a passion for Filipino cuisine that matched Malaya's own. Now Elena was not just her right hand in the kitchen, but a rising star in her own right, recently featured in a prominent food magazine as one of the Philippines' chefs to watch. The evening service was in full swing when Malaya noticed a commotion near the entrance of the restaurant. Curious, she peered out from the kitchen to see a group of people entering, led by a distinguished-looking man in an impeccable suit. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized him. It was Anton Reyes, the reclusive owner of the Grand Manila Hotel and one of the most influential figures in the Philippine hospitality industry. Malaya had heard rumors that he rarely dined out, preferring the privacy of his own establishments. His presence here was unexpected, to say the least. Composing herself, Malaya returned to the kitchen, determined to ensure that every dish that left her kitchen was nothing short of perfection. As the orders for Mr. Reyes's table came in, she personally oversaw each preparation, adding her own flourishes to elevate the dishes even further. As the final course was being prepared, Eleanor approached Malaya with wide eyes. Chef, Mr. Reyes is Malaya took a deep breath, smoothed her chef's jacket, and made her way to the dining room. As she approached Mr. Reyes's table, she was struck by the warmth in his eyes, so at odds with his reputation as a stern businessman. Chef Santos, he said, rising to greet her. I must say, this has been one of the most extraordinary meals I've had in years. Your take on Filipino cuisine is truly revolutionary. Malaya felt a flush of pride at his words. Thank you, Mr. Reyes. That means a great deal coming from you. Mr. Reyes gestured for her to sit. I have a proposition for you, Chef Santos. The Grand Manila Hotel is planning to open a new flagship restaurant, one that will showcase the very best of Filipino cuisine. I would like you to be the executive chef. Malaya's mind reeled. The Grand Manila Hotel was an institution, a symbol of luxury and excellence in the Philippines. To be offered the position of executive chef at their new restaurant was an incredible honor, and yet, Mr. Reyes, I'm incredibly flattered by your offer. Malaya began carefully. But I've built something special here with my team. I'm not sure I can leave that behind. Mr. Reyes nodded, as if he had expected this response. I understand understand your hesitation, Chef Santos, but please, hear me out. What I'm proposing is not just a job, but a partnership. We want to create a restaurant that will be a beacon for Filipino cuisine worldwide. With your talent and our resources, we could do something truly extraordinary. As Mr. Reyes outlined his vision, Malaya found herself intrigued despite her initial reservation. He spoke of a restaurant that would not only serve exquisite food, but also function as a culinary research center, exploring and documenting traditional Filipino ingredients and techniques. There would be an attached culinary school, providing opportunities for aspiring chefs from all backgrounds. Think about it, Mr. Reyes said as he prepared to leave. Take all the time you need. This is not just about a new restaurant, Chef Santos. This is about creating a legacy for Filipino cuisine. As Malaya returned to the kitchen, her mind was abuzz with possibilities. Mr. Reyes's offer was tempting, offering resources and reach beyond anything she currently had. But could she leave behind the restaurant she had built from the ground up, the team she had nurtured and grown with? Over the next few days, Malaya found herself torn. She discussed the offer with Elena and the rest of her senior staff, wanting to be transparent about the opportunity and the decision she faced. To her surprise, her team was overwhelmingly supportive of the idea. Chef, this is an incredible opportunity, Elena said, echoing the sentiments of the others. Think of how many more people you could reach, how many more chefs you could train. We've learned so much from you. It's time to share that knowledge even more widely. Still uncertain, Malaya decided to seek advice from the person who had been there from the beginning of her culinary journey, Mr. Reyes from Cucina. She invited him to the restaurant one afternoon before service, and over cups of strong Filipino coffee, she shared the details of Anton Reyes's offer. Mr. Reyes listened, intently, his expression thoughtful. When Malaya finished speaking, he was quiet for a moment before responding. Malaya, do you remember what I told you when you were hesitating about entering that first competition? I said that your talent deserved a bigger stage. This feels like another such moment. Malaya nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. But what about loyalty? This restaurant, this team, they've been with me through everything. Mr. Reyes reached across the table to pat her hand gently. Loyalty doesn't mean staying in one place forever, Malaya. It means doing right by the people who have supported you. And sometimes that means taking the next step in your journey, showing them that their faith in you was well placed. As Mr. Reyes's words sank in, Malaya felt a sense of clarity begin to emerge. She thought about all she had accomplished in her current restaurant and all that she could potentially achieve with the resources and platform Mr. Anton Reyes was offering. That evening, after service, Malaya gathered her team. I've made a decision, she began, looking around at the faces of the chefs who had become like family to her. I'm going to accept Mr. Reyes's offer. There was a moment of silence. Then Elena stepped forward and enveloped Malaya in a hug. We're so proud of you, Chef. You're going to do amazing things. As the team crowded around her, offering congratulations and support, Malaya felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She realized that this next step wasn't about leaving something behind, but about carrying forward all that she had learned and achieved, ready to make an even bigger impact. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity as Malaya worked with Anton to life. They traveled across the Philippines, meeting with local farmers, fishermen, and artisanal food producers. Malaya was determined that the new restaurant would not only serve exceptional food, but also support and showcase the best of Philippine agriculture and traditional food production methods. The restaurant's design was a collaboration between Malaya and a team of architects and interior designers. She insisted on an open kitchen concept, wanting diners to be able to see and feel the energy of the culinary process. The dining room would feature works by Filipino artists and artisans, creating a space that celebrated Philippine culture in all its forms. As the opening day approached, Malaya found herself working around the clock, fine-tuning menus, training staff, and overseeing every detail of the restaurant's setup. Despite the long hours and high pressure, she felt energized by the challenge and the potential of what they were creating. The night before the grand opening, Malaya stood alone in the new kitchen, taking in the gleaming equipment and spacious layout. It was a far cry from the modest kitchen at Cucina where she had started her journey, or even from her previous restaurant. Yet as she ran her hand along the smooth countertops, she felt that same spark of excitement and possibility that had always driven her. She thought of her Lola, wishing she could see this moment. I hope I'm making you proud, Malaya whispered whispered to the quiet kitchen. The grand opening of Lhasa, as the new restaurant was called, was a star-studded affair. Food critics, celebrities, and culinary enthusiasts from around the world had flown in for the event. As Malaya watched the first dishes leave the kitchen, she felt a familiar mix of nervousness and excitement. The menu was a culinary journey through the Philippines, each dish telling a story of a particular region, ingredient, or tradition. There was a modern interpretation of kinilaw featuring sustainably caught local fish, cured in a blend of native vinegars and citrus. A dish of heirloom rice varieties was accompanied by a selection of inventive vegetable preparations showcasing the diversity of Philippine produce. The main course was a showstopper, a contemporary take on lechon, featuring different preparations of pork from a heritage breed raised specifically for the restaurant. It was served with the array of traditional and innovative sauces, allowing diners to explore different flavor combinations. For dessert, Malaya had created a tasting plate that took diners on a sweet journey across the archipelago, from a delicate cassava cake from Luzon to a durian pastry inspired by Mindanao. As the evening progressed, Malaya could hear the excited murmurs and exclamations of delight from the dining room. Critics were scribbling notes furiously, and she could see diners taking photos of every dish, no doubt to be shared on social media within moments. Towards the end of the service, Anton Reyes entered the kitchen, his face beaming with pride. "Chef Santos," he said loud enough for the entire kitchen to hear, "you've exceeded every expectation. This is not just a meal. It's an experience, a celebration of everything that makes Filipino cuisine special." Malaya felt a wave of emotion wash over her. "Thank you, Mr. Reyes. This wouldn't have been possible without your vision and support." As the last desserts were served and the kitchen began to wind down, Malaya gathered her team. Looking at their tired but happy faces, she felt a surge of pride and gratitude. "Tonight," she said, "we didn't just serve food. We told our story, the story of Filipino cuisine, to the world. Each and every one of you should be proud of what we've accomplished." The team erupted in cheers and applause, the exhaustion of the long day melting away in the face of their shared achievement. In the weeks that followed, Lhasa became the talk of the culinary world. Reservations were booked months in advance, and glowing reviews poured in from critics around the globe. But for Malaya, the most meaningful feedback came from local diners, especially those from older generations. One evening, an elderly woman asked to speak with Malaya. As she approached the table, the woman grasped her hand, tears in her eyes. "Chef," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I'm 85 years old. I've lived through war, seen our country change so much. But tonight, eating your food, I felt like a child again, tasting my mother's cooking. You've taken our flavors, our memories, and made them something new and beautiful. Thank you for honoring our culinary heritage." Malaya felt her own eyes well up with tears. This, she realized, was why she cooked. Not for the accolades or the reviews, but to touch people's hearts, to connect them with their memories and their culture through food. As Lhasa's reputation grew, so did its impact on the broader culinary scene. The attached from across Southeast Asia, eager to learn Malaya's innovative approach to traditional cuisines. The research center became a hub for documenting and preserving traditional ingredients and techniques, with Malaya and her team working closely with anthropologists and food historians. One day, as Malaya was conducting a masterclass for a group of young chefs, she received news that left her momentarily speechless. Lhasa had been awarded 3 Michelin stars, becoming the first restaurant in the Philippines to achieve this highest honor. As she shared the news with her team, Malaya felt a complex mix of emotions: pride in what they had achieved, gratitude for everyone who had supported her journey, and a renewed sense of responsibility to continue pushing the boundaries of what Filipino cuisine could be. That evening, after an especially jubilant service, Malaya found a quiet moment to call her mother. As she shared the news of the Michelin stars, her mother's proud tears were audible even through the phone. "Your Lola is smiling down on you. Anak," her mother said, her voice thick with emotion, "you've taken the flavors of her kitchen and elevated them to the stars." As Malaya hung up the phone, she felt a familiar presence, as if her Lola was right there with her. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice. "Remember, Malaya, no matter how many stars you have, the most important ingredient is always love." Malaya smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She'd come so far from that little girl, watching her Lola in the kitchen, but in the ways that truly mattered started, she hadn't changed at all. She was still cooking with love, still honoring her heritage, still finding joy in feeding people. As she looked out over the Manila skyline from her office window, Malaya felt a sense of excitement for what the future held. There were still so many flavors to explore, so many techniques to master, so many young chefs to mentor. Her journey, she realized, was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. With renewed energy, Malaya turned back to her kitchen. There was work to be done, flavors to be created, and a culinary legacy to build, and she was ready for every moment of it. In the years that followed, Malaya continued to innovate and inspire. Lhasa became a pilgrimage site for food lovers from around the world, while the Culinary School and Research Center helped to train a new generation of chefs passionate about elevating Asian cuisines. Malaya never forgot her roots, regularly returning to Cucina to Cook with Mr. Reyes and mentor young chefs. She established a foundation to support small-scale farmers and food producers across the Philippines, ensuring that as Filipino cuisine gained global recognition, those at the grassroots level would benefit too. As she approached her 40th birthday, Malaya found herself reflecting on her journey. From the humble kitchen of Cucina to the glittering world of Michelin stars, it had been an incredible ride. But what gave her the most satisfaction was not the personal accolades, but the impact she had made on Filipino cuisine and the opportunities she had created for others. She thought of Elena, now a renowned chef in her own right, running the kitchen at Malaya's original restaurant. She thought of the hundreds of young chefs who had passed through Lhasa's culinary school, now spreading the gospel of Filipino flavors across the globe. She thought of the farmers and producers whose lives had been changed by the spotlight her work had shone on their products. As Malaya prepared for another day in the kitchen, she felt that familiar spark of excitement. There were still new flavors to discover, new techniques to master, new stories to tell through food, and she was ready for all of it, armed with her knives, her knowledge, and the enduring love for Filipino cuisine that had started in her Lola's kitchen all those years ago. The culinary world had been transformed by Malaya's journey, but in her heart, she was still that girl who found magic in the sizzle of garlic hitting hot oil, who saw infinite possibilities in a pot of simmering adobo. And as long as that fire burned within her, Malaya knew her culinary adventure would continue, with each dish a new chapter in her ever-evolving story. As Malaya's 40th birthday approached, she found herself in a reflective mood. The past decade had been a whirlwind of success, innovation, and growth. Lhasa had maintained its 3 Michelin stars, becoming a beacon for Filipino cuisine on the global stage. The culinary school attached to the restaurant had produced a new generation of chefs who were now spreading the gospel of Filipino flavors across the world, and the research center had made significant strides in documenting and preserving traditional ingredients and techniques. Yet, despite all her achievements, Malaya felt a familiar itch, a restlessness that had always driven. As she stood in Lhasa's bustling kitchen one evening, overseeing the dinner service, she realized that she was ready for a new adventure. The next morning, Malaya called a meeting with her senior staff. As they gathered in the restaurant's private dining room, she could see the curiosity in their eyes. It wasn't often that she called for impromptu meetings, especially not before the lunch service. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Malaya began, looking around at the faces of the chefs who had become like family to her, "and I've realized that it's time for me to take on a new challenge." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Elena, who had been with Malaya since the early days and was now her head chef, leaned forward with concern. "What do you mean, chef? Are you leaving Lhasa?" Malaya shook her head, smiling reassuringly. "Not exactly. I'm not leaving Lhasa, but I am planning to step back from day-to-day operations. I want to embark on a culinary journey across the Philippines, to delve deeper into our regional cuisines and discover flavors and techniques that might be on the verge of being lost." As Malaya outlined her plan, she could see the mix of emotions. On her team's faces, excitement, concern, and pride all mingled together. She explained that she wanted to spend a year traveling to different regions of the Philippines, learning from local cooks, farmers, and food artisans. Her goal was to not only enhance Lhasa's menu, but also to document these culinary traditions. For future generations. But who will run Lhasa while you're gone? One of the sous chefs asked, voicing the concern that was on everyone's mind. Malaya smiled, turning to Elena. I'm hoping that Elena will step up as executive chef in my absence. She's more than ready for the role. Elena's eyes widened in surprise. Me? But chef, I don't know if I'm ready for such a responsibility. You are, Malaya said firmly. You've been by my side through every challenge and triumph. You understand the heart and soul of Lhasa better than anyone. I trust you to carry on our vision while I'm away. As the meeting concluded and the team dispersed to prepare for lunch service, Malaya could feel the energy in the room had shifted. There was an excitement, a sense of anticipation for the changes to come. She knew there would be challenges ahead, both for her on her journey and for the team at Lhasa, but she was confident that this was the right next step. Over the next few weeks, Malaya threw herself into planning her culinary expedition. She reached out to contacts across the Philippines, arranging visits to remote villages, small farms, and local markets. She studied maps and historical records, determined to uncover culinary traditions that had been overlooked or forgotten. As news of her planned journey spread, Malaya was inundated with messages from chefs, food writers, and culinary enthusiasts from around the world. Many offered to join her for portions of the trip, eager to learn alongside her. While flattered by the interest, Malaya decided to keep her core travel group small, bringing along only a videographer to document the journey and a young chef from Lhasa's culinary school as an apprentice. The night before her departure, Lhasa hosted a special dinner. The menu was a retrospective of Malaya's culinary journey, featuring dishes from her early days at Kusina through to her latest creations at Lhasa. As she moved through the dining room, greeting guests and sharing stories behind each dish, Malaya felt a mix of nostalgia and excitement for the adventure ahead. Mr. Reyes from Kusina was there, his eyes glistening with pride as he embraced Malaya. You've come so far, anak, he said, using the Tagalog term for child that he had called her since her early days in his kitchen. But I have a feeling your greatest discoveries are still ahead of you. Anton Reyes, the owner of the Grand Manila Hotel and Malaya's partner in Lhasa, raised a toast. To Malaya, he said, his voice carrying across the room, who has already transformed Filipino cuisine on the global stage and who now embarks on a journey to deepen our understanding of our culinary heritage. We eagerly await the flavors and stories you will bring back to us. As the evening wound down, Malaya found a quiet moment to slip into the kitchen. She stood there, taking in the familiar sights and sounds, the hiss of steam, the rhythmic chopping of knives, the calls of, "Yes, chef." She felt a lump form in her throat, realizing how much she would miss this daily symphony. Elena approached, sensing Malaya's emotional state. "We'll take good care of Lhasa while you're gone, chef," she said softly. "Just promise you'll share all your discoveries with us when you return." Malaya pulled Elena into a tight hug. "I know you will," she said, "and I promise every flavor, every technique I learn, I'll bring back to share with all of you." The next morning, as the sun rose over Manila, her first stop was the northern region of Luzon, known for its terraced rice fields and unique highland cuisines. As her small team traveled into the mountains, Malaya felt a sense of anticipation building. She was about to embark on the most exciting culinary adventure of her life. In the remote village of Banawe, Malaya was welcomed by the local Ifugao people. She spent days learning about their traditional way of life, centered around the cultivation of heirloom rice varieties. In the humble kitchen of an elderly woman named Lola Maria, Malaya discovered the art of cooking rice in bamboo tubes, a technique that imparted a subtle, smoky flavor to the grains. As she helped Lola Maria prepare a traditional meal, Malaya was struck by the simplicity and purity of the flavors. The rice was accompanied by vegetables foraged from the surrounding forests and a stew made from wild boar hunted by the village men. Every ingredient had a story, a connection to the land and the people. This is the essence of Filipino cuisine, Malaya thought to herself as she savored each bite. This connection to the earth, to tradition, to community. From Luzon, Malaya's journey took her to the Visayas, the central island group of the Philippines. On the island of Negros, she delved into the world of sugarcane, learning about the industry that had shaped the region's culture and cuisine for centuries. In a small town known for its traditional muscovado sugar production, Malaya met Don Fernando, a third-generation sugar miller. He showed her the painstaking painstaking process of extracting and cooking down sugarcane juice to create the rich, molasses-like muscovado. This sugar is the soul of our desserts, Don Fernando explained as he offered Malaya a spoonful of the dark, moist sugar. It's not just sweetness, it's history and heritage in every grain. Inspired by this experience, Malaya spent evenings experimenting in a makeshift kitchen, creating new desserts that showcased the complex flavors of muscovado. She dreamed up a muscovado flan, its caramel layer deepened with a hint of aged rum, and a delicate turon banana spring roll filled with muscovado caramelized bananas and jackfruit. As her journey continued, Malaya found herself constantly amazed by the diversity of Filipino cuisine. In Bicol, she learned the art of balancing fiery chilies with the richness of coconut milk. In Pampanga, often called the culinary capital of the Philippines, she delved into complex Spanish-influenced dishes that spoke to the country's colonial history, but it was often in the humblest settings that Malaya found the most profound inspiration. In a small coastal village in Palawan, she spent a day with local fishermen, learning about sustainable fishing practices that had been passed down for generations. As the sun set, she helped prepare a simple meal of grilled fish stuffed with local herbs and wrapped in banana leaves. As she bit into the fish, its flesh infused with the flavors of the sea and the earth, Malaya felt tears spring to her eyes. This was what she had been searching for, this perfect harmony of flavor, technique, and respect for ingredients. Throughout her journey, Malaya made sure to document everything she learned. She filled notebooks with recipes and techniques, pressed leaves and flowers from unique herbs, and captured hours of video footage. Her young apprentice, Maria, proved to be an invaluable assistant, her endless curiosity and keen palate helping Malaya to see familiar ingredients in new ways. As the months passed, news of Malaya's culinary expeditions spread. Food enthusiasts began to trace her journey, visiting the same villages and markets, eager to taste the dishes that had inspired her. Without intending to, Malaya found herself sparking a renewed interest in regional Filipino cuisines. Midway through her year-long journey, Malaya received a call from Elena. Lhasa had just retained its 3 Michelin stars under Elena's leadership, and the restaurant was thriving. But chef, Elena said, her voice full of excitement, you won't believe how much interest there is in your journey. People are constantly asking when you'll be back and what new dishes you'll bring. Malaya felt a warmth spread through her chest. She was proud of Elena and the team for maintaining Lhasa's standards, but she was also touched by the anticipation for her return. It reaffirmed her belief in the importance of this journey, not just for herself, but for the broader appreciation of Filipino cuisine. As her expedition neared its end, Malaya found herself in Mindanao, the southernmost major island of the Philippines. Here, she delved into the rich culinary traditions influenced by the region's significant Muslim population. In the bustling city of Zamboanga, Malaya was introduced to the vibrant flavors of Sama Bayao cuisine. She learned to make tiula itum, a striking black soup colored with burnt coconut. The dish and filled was a revelation, its deep, smoky flavor unlike anything Malaya had tasted before. On her last night in Mindanao, Malaya was invited to a traditional Ramadan iftar meal as she broke the fast alongside her Muslim hosts, sharing dishes that blended local ingredients with Middle Eastern influences. Malaya felt a profound sense of connection. This, she realized, was the power of food to bring people together across cultural and religious boundaries. As Malaya prepared to return to Manila, she felt a mix of emotions. She was excited to get back to Lhasa, to share all she had learned with her team and to translate her experiences into new dishes. But she also felt a tinge of sadness at leaving behind the simple kitchens and warm hospitality she had encountered on her journey. On her last morning, as she stood watching the sunrise over the Sulu Sea, Malaya made a silent promise to herself. She would use everything she had learned, not just to enhance Lhasa's menu, but to continue promoting and preserving the rich tapestry of Filipino cuisine. The return to Manila was a whirlwind of emotion fun and activity. As Malaya stepped into Lasa's kitchen for the first time in a year, she was engulfed in a group hug by her team. Elena, her eyes shining with tears, welcomed her back with a specially prepared menu showcasing how Lasa had evolved in her absence. As Malaya tasted each dish, she felt a surge of pride. Elena and the team had not only maintained Lasa's standards, but had continued to innovate and push boundaries. She could see echoes of her own style, but also exciting new directions that Elena had explored. Over the next few weeks, Malaya threw herself into translating her journey into Lasa's new menu. She worked closely with Elena and the team, sharing the techniques she had learned and the flavors she had discovered. Together, they crafted dishes that honored traditional Filipino cuisines while pushing them into new, exciting territories. The centerpiece of the new menu was a tasting journey through the Philippines, each course representing a different region and telling the story of its unique culinary heritage. There was a delicate soup of heirloom rice and foraged herbs from the mountains of Luzon, a complex curry of Mindanao spices and local seafood, and a dessert that showcased the various sweeteners of the Philippines, from muscovado to wild honey. As news spread of Malaya's return and Lasa's new menu, the restaurant was inundated with reservation requests. Food critics and culinary enthusiasts from around the world clamored for a taste of Malaya's culinary journey. On the night of the new menu's debut, the atmosphere in Lasa was electric. As Malaya moved through the dining room, sharing stories behind each dish, she could see the wonder and excitement on diners' faces. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she was not just serving meals, but sharing the rich culinary heritage of the Philippines. In the weeks that followed, Malaya found herself busier than ever. In addition to her work at Lasa, she was in demand for interviews, culinary demonstrations, and speaking engagements. Everyone wanted to hear about her journey and her vision for the future of Filipino cuisine. But amidst the whirlwind of activity, Malaya never lost sight of the deeper purpose behind her work. She used her platform to advocate for the small farmers, fishermen, and food artisans she had met on her journey. She worked with agricultural organizations to promote heirloom varieties of rice, fruits, and vegetables, and she continued to mentor young chefs, encouraging them to explore their own culinary roots. One evening, as Malaya was preparing for dinner service, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Lola Maria, the elderly woman from Banawe, who had taught her about cooking rice in bamboo tubes. Lola Maria had never been to Manila before, and her eyes were wide as she took in the gleaming kitchen of Lasa. "Anak," Lola Maria said, using the Tagalog word for child, "I heard about the wonderful things you're doing here. I wanted to see for myself." Malaya felt tears spring to her eyes as she embraced the older woman. "Lola," she said, "everything I'm doing here, it started with people like you, with the lessons you taught me." As Malaya showed Lola Maria around the kitchen, explaining how they had incorporated traditional techniques into their modern dishes, she felt a profound sense of coming full circle. From her own Lola's humble kitchen to the heights of culinary fame, and now back to honoring the wisdom of elders like Lola Maria, Malaya's journey had been one of constant learning and growth. That night, as service ended and the kitchen quieted, Malaya found herself alone in her office. She looked at the wall where she had hung photos from her journey, each image a reminder of the people and places that had shaped her understanding of Filipino cuisine. She thought about how far she had her first culinary competition. She had achieved more than she had ever dreamed possible, but she knew that her journey was far from over. There were still flavors to discover, techniques to master, stories to tell through, food. As Malaya closed her eyes, she could almost smell the aromatics of her Lola's kitchen, could almost hear the sizzle of garlic hitting hot oil. And in that moment, she knew that no matter how far she traveled or how much acclaim she received, she would always be that girl who found magic in the simple act of cooking, who saw infinite possibilities in a pot of simmering adobo. With a smile, Malaya stood up, ready to face whatever new adventures the culinary world had in store for her. She was Malaya Santos, a chef, a storyteller, a guardian of Filipino culinary heritage, and her journey, like the evolution of cuisine itself, was endless. As Malaya's culinary empire continued to flourish, she found herself facing an unexpected challenge. One morning, as she was preparing for a busy day at Lasa, she received an urgent call from Elena. "Chef, you need to come to the restaurant right away." Elena's voice was tense. "There's been an incident." Malaya rushed to Lasa, her mind racing with possibilities. When she arrived, she found the kitchen in disarray. Several of her chefs Santos were looking ill, and there was an unmistakable smell of spoiled food in the air. "What happened?" Malaya demanded, surveying the scene. Elena approached, her face pale. "It's the seafood delivery from last night. Something was wrong with it. Several of our staff who tasted it during prep are sick, and we've had to throw out everything from that shipment." Malaya's heart sank. This was a disaster. Not only was her team's health at risk, but they'd have to completely rework the menu for the day, and there was a risk to the restaurant's reputation if word got out. "Have you contacted the supplier?" Malaya asked, already moving to examine the remaining stock. Elena nodded. "They're claiming it's not their fault, that the seafood was fresh when it left their facility. But chef, this isn't the first time we've had issues with them." Malaya frowned, remembering the minor complaints they'd had over the past few months, small inconsistencies in quality that they'd overlooked due to the supplier's usually reliable service. "All right," Malaya said, her mind already formulating a plan. "First, anyone who's feeling ill needs to go home and rest. Elena, I need you to coordinate with the front of house to adjust our reservations for today. We'll need to call everyone with a booking and explain that we have a limited menu due to unforeseen circumstances." As Elena moved to carry out her instructions, Malaya turned to her remaining kitchen staff. "We need to do a complete inventory of what we have and what we can use. We're going to create a new menu for today, focusing on non-seafood dishes. I want you to think creatively. Use every skill you've learned. This is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to showcase our ability to adapt." The kitchen buzzed with renewed energy as the team set to work. Malaya rolled up her sleeves and joined them, her mind racing with ideas for dishes they could create with their remaining ingredients. As they worked, Malaya couldn't shake a nagging feeling. This incident, while unfortunate, had exposed a vulnerability in their operation. They had become too reliant on a single supplier for their seafood, a key component of their menu. It was a risk she should have seen and addressed earlier. While the team prepared for the day's service, Malaya retreated to her office to make some calls. She reached out to contacts she'd made during her culinary journey across the Philippines, small-scale fishermen and coastal communities who practiced sustainable fishing methods. By the time the first diners arrived that evening, Lhasa had a new, improvised menu in place. Malaya had worked with her team to create dishes that highlighted local, seasonal produce and land-based proteins. To her relief and pride, the customers were understanding about the limited options, and many even expressed excitement about trying the special one-night-only menu. As she moved through the dining room, explaining the situation to guests and getting their feedback on the new dishes, Malaya's mind was already looking ahead. This crisis had shown her that it was time for a change, not just in their supplier relationships, but in their entire approach to sourcing ingredients. Over the next few weeks, Malaya threw herself into revamping Lhasa's supply chain. She traveled to coastal communities, meeting with local fishermen and aquaculture operators. She was determined to create a network of small-scale suppliers who could provide Lhasa with fresh, sustainably sourced seafood. During one of these trips, Malaya met Carlos, a third-generation fisherman from a small village in Palawan. Carlos and his sustainable fishing methods for generations, but was struggling to compete with larger industrial fishing operations. As Malaya sat with Carlos on his small boat, watching the sun set over the pristine waters, an idea began to form. "What if," she mused aloud, "we could create a direct partnership between restaurants like Lhasa and fishing communities like yours? We could guarantee to buy your catch at fair prices, and in return, we'd get the freshest, most sustainably sourced seafood possible." Carlos's eyes lit up at the idea. "That would change everything for us," he said. "We've always known our methods are better for the ocean and produce better quality fish, but it's been hard to compete on price with the big operators." Energized by the possibility, Malaya spent the next few months developing what she called the Sea to Table initiative. She worked with marine biologists to ensure that the fishing practices were truly sustainable, and with logistics experts to figure out how to get the fresh catch to Lhasa quickly and efficiently. The program started small, with just Carlos's community supplying Lhasa, but as word spread, other restaurants in Manila began to express interest. Soon, Malaya found herself not just running a restaurant, but spearheading a movement to transform the way the culinary industry in the Philippines sourced its seafood. The Sea-to-Table initiative brought new challenges and responsibilities. Malaya had to navigate complex regulations, manage relationships with multiple small suppliers, and educate her staff and customers about the importance of sustainable sourcing. But every time she tasted the incredibly fresh, flavorful seafood that arrived at Lasa, she knew it was worth the effort. As the program grew, Malaya began to see its impact beyond just the quality of the food at Lasa. The fishing communities involved in the initiative were thriving, able to continue their traditional ways of life while earning fair wages. The marine ecosystems around their fishing grounds were healthier, with populations of overfished species beginning to recover. One day, as Malaya was overseeing the morning seafood delivery at Lasa, she was surprised to see a familiar face. It was Chef Laurent, the French chef who had initially dismissed her during the culinary competition years ago, but who had later asked to work in her kitchen. "Chef Santos," he said, approaching her with a smile, "I hope I'm not intruding, but I heard about your Sea-to-Table program, and I had to come see it for myself." Malaya welcomed him warmly, pleasantly surprised by his interest. As she showed him the day's delivery, explaining the program and introducing him to the fisherman who had brought in the catch, she could see the amazement in Chef Laurent's eyes. "This is remarkable," he said, examining a glistening tuna. "The quality is exceptional. And to think this was swimming in the ocean just hours ago." Malaya nodded, feeling a surge of pride. "It's not just about the quality of the food, though that's certainly a big part of it. It's about creating a sustainable system that benefits everyone, from the fishermen to the diners." Chef Laurent was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, Malaya, when we first met, I underestimated you. I thought your lack of formal training and your focus on Filipino cuisine would limit you, but you've proven me wrong in every way. What you're doing here, it's not just cooking, it's changing the entire food system for the better." Malaya felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Thank you, Laurent. That means a lot coming from you." As Chef Laurent left, promising to spread the word about the initiative, among his colleagues, Malaya reflected on how far she'd come, from a young chef trying to prove herself to a leader in the culinary world who was now shaping the very way restaurants sourced their ingredients. The success of the Sea-to-Table initiative led Malaya to expand her focus on sustainable sourcing. She began to apply the same principles to other ingredients, working directly with small farmers and producers across the Philippines. One project that became particularly close to her heart was the revival of heirloom rice varieties. During her culinary journey across the country, Malaya had discovered numerous indigenous rice varieties, each with its unique flavor profile and cultural significance. Many of these were at risk of disappearing, replaced by more commercially viable but less flavorful varieties. Malaya partnered with agricultural scientists and local farming communities to create a program that would preserve and promote these heirloom varieties. Lasa began featuring a different heirloom rice each month, telling the story of its origin and the community that grew it. The program was a hit with diners who were fascinated by the diversity of flavors and textures in these traditional rice varieties. More importantly, who were keeping these ancient agricultural practices alive. As Malaya's initiatives gained attention, she found herself increasingly in the public eye. She was invited to speak at conferences, not just about cooking, but about food systems, sustainability, and cultural preservation. Her journey had taken her far beyond the kitchen, into the realms of environmental activism and social entrepreneurship. One evening, as Malaya was preparing for a keynote speech at a major food sustainability conference, she received an unexpected visitor at Lasa. It was Anton Reyes, the owner of the Grand Manila Hotel and her partner in the restaurant. "Malaya," he said, his face serious, "we need to talk about the future of Lasa." For a moment, Malaya felt a flicker of concern. Had all her activities outside the restaurant been negatively affecting Lasa's performance? But as they sat down in her office, Anton's expression softened into a smile. "Malaya, what you've achieved with Lasa goes beyond anything I could have imagined when we first partnered. You've not only created one of the best restaurants in the world, but you've also become a leader in sustainable gastronomy." Malaya felt a mixture of pride and humility at his words. "Thank you, Anton, but I couldn't have done any of it without your support and trust." Anton nodded. "And you're You'll always have that, but I think it's time we talked about expanding your platform. I believe the principles you've developed here at LASA, the Sea-to-Table program, the Heirloom Rice Initiative, all of it could be applied on a much larger scale. As Anton outlined his vision, Malaya felt a familiar spark of excitement. He was proposing to create a culinary institute with Malaya at its head that would focus not just on cooking techniques, but on the entire food system, from sustainable agriculture to innovative gastronomy. Think about it, Anton said, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. We could train the next generation of chefs to think beyond the kitchen, to consider their role in the larger food ecosystem. We could influence not just how food is cooked, but how it's grown, distributed, and consumed. The idea was both thrilling and daunting. It would mean stepping back from the day-to-day operations of LASA, taking on a more strategic role. But as Malaya considered the potential impact of such an institute, she felt a growing sense of purpose. I'll need some time to think about it, she told Anton. This would be a big change, and I want to make sure it's the right move, not just for me, but for everyone involved with LASA and our various initiatives. Anton nodded understandingly. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Malaya, I truly believe this could be your greatest contribution yet to the culinary world. As Anton left, Malaya sat back in her chair, her mind whirling with possibilities. She thought about her journey, from the humble kitchen of Cucina to the glittering world of Michelin stars, and now to the brink of potentially reshaping culinary education itself. She thought about her Lola, about the lessons she had learned. In that small kitchen so many years ago, cooking is love made visible, her grandmother used to say. And now Malaya realized she had the opportunity to spread that love, that respect for food and its origins on a global scale. Over the next few weeks, as Malaya mulled over Anton's proposal, she found herself paying extra attention to the young chefs in her kitchen. She watched as Elena mentored a new apprentice, patiently explaining the importance of understanding the origin of each ingredient they used. She observed the excitement in a young chef's eyes as he created a new dish. Using one of the heirloom rice varieties, his creativity sparked by the unique flavor profile of the grain. She listened as her team discussed ways to minimize food waste, their conversation extending beyond the kitchen to consider the entire supply chain. It was during one of these moments, as she watched her team embody the principles she had worked so hard to instill, that Malaya made her decision. She realized that while LASA would always be special to her, her true legacy could be in shaping the next generation of chefs to think beyond the confines of the kitchen. Malaya called a meeting with her senior staff, including Elena. As she explained Anton's proposal and her decision to accept it, she could see a mix of emotions on their faces, pride and excitement tinged with a hint of sadness. This doesn't mean I'm abandoning LASA, Malaya assured them. The restaurant will always be at the heart of everything we do. In fact, I'm hoping it can serve as a kind of living laboratory for the Institute, a place where we can put our ideas into practice. Elena, who had been quiet throughout Malaya's explanation, finally spoke up. Chef, I think this is an amazing opportunity. What you've taught us here at LASA about the impact of our choices, it's changed the way we think about food. Imagine being able to instill those values in chefs all over the world. Malaya felt a surge of affection for her longtime colleague and friend. Thank you, Elena. Your support means everything, and I hope you know I couldn't take on this new challenge if I wasn't absolutely confident in your ability to lead LASA. As the meeting concluded and her team dispersed, each lost in thought about the changes to come, Malaya felt a sense of excitement building. She was stepping into unknown territory, but she was ready for the challenge. Over the next few months, Malaya worked closely with Anton and a team of educators and industry experts to develop the curriculum for the new institute. They designed programs that would cover everything from traditional cooking techniques to sustainable agriculture, from food policy to culinary innovation. The institute would be housed in a state-of-the-art facility, complete with experimental kitchens, hydroponic gardens, and a food science lab. But it would also have close ties to the communities Malaya had worked with over the years, the fishermen, farmers, and artisanal producers who had been so integral to her journey. As the launch date for the institute approached, Malaya found found herself reflecting on the path that had led her to this point. She thought about the young chef she had been, entering her first culinary competition, unsure of her place in the world of high-end cuisine. She thought about the lessons she had learned, the challenges she had overcome, the people who had supported her along the way. On the evening before the Institute's official opening, Malaya took a quiet moment to visit Cucina, the restaurant, where her culinary journey had begun. Mr. Reyes, now retired but still a regular presence in the restaurant, welcomed her with open arms. As they sat together, sharing a meal of the simple, heartfelt dishes that had first ignited Malaya's passion for cooking, Mr. Reyes raised his glass in a toast. "To you, Malaya," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "From a young chef with big dreams to a visionary changing the future of food. Your Lola would be so proud." Malaya felt tears prick at her eyes as she clinked her glass against his. "Thank you, Mr. Reyes, for everything. I wouldn't be here without you, without Cucina." As she left Cucina that night, Malaya felt a sense of coming full circle. Tomorrow, she would open the doors to a new chapter in her life, embarking on her biggest challenge yet. But no matter where this new path led her, she knew she would always carry with her the lessons she had learned in that small kitchen, the flavors of her childhood, and the love for Filipino cuisine that had started it all. Malaya Santos, once an underdog chef with big dreams, had become a culinary pioneer, an advocate for sustainable gastronomy, and now a mentor to the next generation of chefs. As she looked towards the future, she felt a familiar spark of excitement. There were still so many flavors to explore, so many stories to tell through food, so many challenges to overcome, and she was ready for all of it. For Malaya, the kitchen had always been a place of transformation, where simple ingredients became extraordinary meals. Now, she was poised to transform the very idea of what a culinary education could be, spreading her philosophy of sustainability, cultural respect, and culinary innovation to chefs around the world. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Malaya's dreams were filled with images of bustling kitchens, flourishing farms, and bountiful seas. In her mind, she could almost hear her Lola's voice, gently reminding her, as always, that cooking is love made visible, and Malaya was ready to make that love visible on a scale she had never before imagined. The morning of the Institute's opening dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself was celebrating this new chapter in Malaya's journey. As she stood at the entrance of the gleaming new building, surrounded by eager students, proud faculty, and a swarm of media, Malaya felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The Institute, which they had named the Sustainable Culinary Arts Academy, SCAA, was unlike any culinary school that had come before it. Its curriculum was designed to produce not just skilled chefs, but culinary leaders who understood the entire food ecosystem, from farm to table and beyond. As Malaya cut the ribbon to officially open the academy, she thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. From the humble kitchen of Cucina to the heights of culinary fame with Lasa, and now to this, a place where she could shape the future of gastronomy itself. The first semester at SCAA was a whirlwind of activity. Malaya found herself constantly moving between classrooms, experimental kitchens, and the academy's rooftop garden. She taught classes on Filipino cuisine and mentored students one-on-one. One day, as Malaya was overseeing a class on heirloom rice varieties, she noticed a young student named Maya who seemed particularly engaged. Maya's eyes lit up as she tasted each variety, asking insightful questions about their cultivation and culinary applications. After class, Maya approached Malaya with a mix of nervousness and determination. "Chef Santos," she began, "I was wondering if I could talk to you about an idea I have." Intrigued, Malaya invited Maya to her office. As they sat down, Maya began to explain her vision for a project that would combine culinary arts with community development. "I come from a small farming village in Mindanao," Maya said. "We have these amazing heirloom fruits that are at risk of disappearing because there's no market for them. I was thinking, what if we could create a program that connects chefs with these small farming communities? We could develop new recipes that showcase these fruits, creating demand and helping to preserve biodiversity." As Maya spoke, Malaya felt a spark of excitement. This was exactly the kind of innovative thinking she had hoped to foster at SCAA. "That's a brilliant idea, Maya," she said. "In fact, I think we could turn this into a larger project for the whole class. Would you be interested in leading it?" Maya's face lit up with surprise and joy. "Really, you think it could work?" Malaya nodded, already envisioning how they could implement the project. "Absolutely. This is exactly the kind of initiative that SCAA was created to support. It combines culinary innovation with sustainability and community development. Let's work on developing a proposal." Over the next few weeks, Malaya worked closely with Maya to refine the project idea. They reached out to contacts in Mindanao, identifying farming communities with unique heirloom fruits. They developed a plan for students to visit these communities, learn about the fruits, and create dishes that would showcase their flavors. As word of the project spread through the academy, other students became excited to participate. Soon, what had started as one student's idea had grown into a major initiative involving multiple classes and departments. The Heirloom Fruit Project, as it came to be known, was launched with great enthusiasm. Students and faculty traveled to Mindanao, spending time in small farming villages, learning about traditional cultivation methods and experimenting with new ways to use these forgotten fruits in modern cuisine. Back at the academy, the kitchens buzzed with excitement as students developed new recipes. There were desserts made with rare varieties of mangoes, savory dishes featuring obscure citrus fruits, and innovative preserves that captured the unique flavors of these heirloom crops. As Malaya watched the project unfold, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was exactly what she had envisioned for SCAA, a place where culinary education could have a real-world impact, preserving cultural heritage while pushing the boundaries of gastronomy. The success of the Heirloom Fruit Project caught the attention of the wider culinary world. Food magazines wrote features about the forgotten fruits of Mindanao, and top restaurants in Manila began requesting supplies of these rare ingredients. One evening, as Malaya was reviewing the latest batch of student recipes featuring heirloom fruits, she received an unexpected call. It was from a representative of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. "Chef Santos," the representative began, "we've been following your work at SCAA with great interest, particularly the Heirloom Fruit Project. We believe this model could be applied to other regions facing similar challenges with agro-biodiversity. We'd like to discuss the possibility of partnering with SCAA to develop a global program." Malaya was stunned. She had hoped that SCAA would make a difference, but she hadn't imagined its impact spreading so far, so quickly. "That sounds incredible," she said. "I'd be honored to discuss this further." Over the next few months, Malaya worked closely with the FAO to develop a global version of the Heirloom Fruit Project. The program would identify endangered crop varieties around the world and connect them with culinary professionals who could create demand for these forgotten foods. As the global program took shape, Malaya found herself traveling more than ever before. She visited remote villages in the Amazon, where rare varieties of cassava were at risk of disappearing. She trekked through the mountains of Peru, learning about ancient potato varieties that had sustained Incan civilizations. In each place, she worked with local chefs and SCAA students to develop recipes that would showcase these unique ingredients. The work was exhausting, but deeply fulfilling. Malaya saw firsthand how culinary innovation could serve as a powerful tool for preserving farmers. She watched as forgotten crops found new life in the kitchens of innovative chefs, and as farming communities gained new sources of income and pride in their agricultural heritage. Back at SCAA, the success of these initiatives was having a profound impact on the students. Malaya saw a new fire in their eyes, a deeper understanding of the power they held as future culinary leaders. They were no longer just learning to cook, they were learning to change the world through food. One day, as Malaya was preparing for a lecture on the Global Heirloom Crop Program, she received news that left her momentarily speechless. SCAA had been nominated for the UNESCO Japan Prize on Education for Sustainable Development. The prize recognized outstanding projects in education for sustainable development, and the nomination was a testament to the impact SCAA was having beyond the culinary world. It was validation of Malaya's vision, proof that a cooking school could be so much more than just a place to learn recipes and techniques. As she shared the news with the SCAA community, Malaya felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She thought about her journey, from the little girl learning to cook cook in her Lola's kitchen to the founder of a globally recognized institution. She thought about all the people who had supported her along the way, Mr. Reyes, Elena, Anton, and countless others. That evening, after the excitement of the announcement had died down, Malaya found a quiet moment to call Mr. Reyes. As she shared the news of the nomination, she could hear the pride in his voice. "Malaya," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "When you first came to work at Cucina, I knew you were special, but I never could have imagined this. You've taken the lessons you learned in our little kitchen and used them to change the world." Malaya felt tears prick at her eyes. "I couldn't have done any of it without you, Mr. Reyes. Everything I've accomplished, it all started at Cucina." As she hung up the phone, Malaya felt a renewed sense of purpose. The UNESCO nomination was an honor, but it was also a responsibility. It was a reminder of the impact she and SCAA could have and the work that still needed to be done. In the weeks leading up to the UNESCO prize announcement, Malaya threw herself into her work with renewed vigor. She expanded SCAA's outreach programs, establishing partnerships with culinary schools in developing countries to share knowledge and resources. She also launched a new initiative focused on food waste reduction, challenging students to develop innovative ways to use every part of an ingredient. The project led to a series of zero-waste pop-up restaurants that caught the attention of environmentalists and foodies alike. When the day of the UNESCO announcement finally arrived, the entire SCAA community gathered in the main auditorium to watch the live stream. As the winners were announced, a hush fell over the room. The UNESCO Japan Prize on Education for Sustainable Development goes to the Sustainable Culinary Arts Academy of the Philippines. The auditorium erupted in cheers. Students and faculty embraced, some wiping away tears of joy. Malaya stood at the center of it all, feeling a mix of elation and humility. As the celebration continued around her, Malaya slipped away to a quiet corner. She pulled out her phone and looked at an old photo of her Lola that she always kept with her. "We did it, Lola," she whispered. "Your lessons about love and respect for food, they've reached around the world." The UNESCO prize brought SCAA into the global spotlight. Malaya found herself in demand as a speaker at international conferences on sustainability and education. She used these platforms to advocate for a more holistic approach to culinary education, one that considered the environmental and social impacts of food production. But even as SCAA's influence grew, Malaya never lost sight of its core mission. She remained committed to hands-on education, often joining students in the kitchens or on field trips to farms and fishing villages. One day, as Malaya was teaching a class on Filipino fermentation techniques, she noticed a new student who seemed particularly engaged. The young man, whose name was Juan, asked insightful questions about the microbiology behind fermentation and its potential applications in sustainable food production. After class, Juan approached Malaya with an idea. "Chef Santos," he began, "I've been thinking about how we could apply fermentation techniques to reduce food waste. What if we developed a program to teach small-scale producers how to ferment, surplus produce, creating new products and extending shelf life?" Malaya felt a familiar spark of excitement. This was the kind of innovative thinking she had always hoped to foster at SCAA. "That's a brilliant idea, Juan," she said. "In fact, I think we could turn this into a larger research project." Juan's face lit up with surprise and enthusiasm. "Really? You think it could work?" Malaya nodded, already envisioning how they could implement the project. "Absolutely. This kind of innovation is exactly what SCAA is all about. Let's work on developing a proposal." Over the next few months, Malaya worked closely with Juan and a team of students to develop the Fermentation for Sustainability project. They reached out to small farmers and producers across the Philippines, identifying common types of surplus produce that often went to waste. The project team developed a series of workshops to teach fermentation techniques to these producers. They created recipes for fermented sauces, pickles, and preserves that could be made with surplus fruits and vegetables. They also worked on developing low-cost, small-scale fermentation equipment that could be used in rural areas with limited resources. As the project progressed, Malaya saw its potential to address multiple issues at once. It was reducing food waste, creating new income streams for small producers, and developing exciting new flavors for chefs to work with. The Fermentation for Sustainability project quickly gained attention beyond SCAA. Food scientists and sustainability experts from around the world expressed interest in the initiative. Soon, Malaya found herself fielding calls from international organizations wanting to replicate the project in other countries. One evening, as Malaya was reviewing the latest batch of fermented products developed by the project team, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Elena, her former sous chef, who was now running Lhasa. "Malaya," Elena said, embracing her old friend and mentor. "I hope I'm not interrupting, but I had to come see you. I've been hearing so much about all the amazing work you're doing." Here at SKAA, Malaya smiled, touched by Elena's visit. "It's always wonderful to see you, Elena. How are things at Lhasa?" Elena's eyes sparkled. "Lhasa is thriving thanks to everything you taught us. But Malaya, I'm here because I have an idea I want to discuss with you." As they sat down in Malaya's office, Elena explained her vision. She wanted to create a partnership between Lhasa and SCAA, where the restaurant could serve as a real-world laboratory for the Academy's innovations. "Think about it," Elena said excitedly. "We could feature dishes using the heirloom fruits from the Mindanao project, or create a tasting menu showcasing the fermented products from Juan's project. It would be a way to bring SCAA's work directly to the public and to create a new kind of dining experience that educates as well as delights." Malaya felt a surge of pride and affection for her former protege. Elena had taken everything she had learned at Lhasa and was now pushing it in new, exciting directions. "Elena, that's a brilliant idea," Malaya said. "It's exactly the kind of bridge between education and real-world application that I've been hoping to build. Let's do it." Over the next few months, Malaya worked closely with Elena to develop the partnership between SCAA and Lhasa. They created a rotating residency program where SCAA students could work in Lhasa's kitchen, bringing their latest projects and innovations directly to diners' plates. The partnership was an immediate success. Food critics raved about Lhasa's new menus, which changed frequently to showcase different SCAA projects. Diners were fascinated by the stories behind each dish, learning about endangered ingredients, sustainable farming practices, and innovative food preservation techniques as they ate. As Malaya watched the partnership flourish, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was the culmination of everything she had worked for, a perfect blend of culinary artistry, sustainability, and education. One evening, as Malaya was preparing to leave SCAA after a long day, she received a call from Anton Reyes. "Malaya," he said, his voice filled with excitement, "I have some news. The James Beard Foundation wants to create a new award category for sustainable culinary education, and they want to name it after you." Malaya was stunned. "After me? But Anton, there are so many people doing important work in this field." "Yes," Anton agreed, "but you've been a pioneer, Malaya. SCAA has changed the way people think about culinary education. This award will ensure that your vision continues to inspire future generations of chefs." As the news sank in, Malaya felt a complex mix of emotions: pride in what she had accomplished, gratitude for all the support she had received along the way, and a renewed sense of responsibility to continue pushing for positive change in the culinary world. That night, as Malaya lay in bed reflecting on the day's events, she thought about her long journey. From the little girl learning to cook in her Lola's kitchen, to the aspiring chef at Cucina, to the award-winning restaurateur, and now to a globally recognized. She thought about all the people she had met along the way, the farmers, fishermen, and food artisans who had shared their knowledge with her. She thought about her students at SCAA, their energy and creativity constantly inspiring her to think in new ways. As she drifted off to sleep, Malaya's mind was already buzzing with ideas for new projects, new ways to use culinary education as a force for positive change in the world. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was ready to face them, armed with her knives, her knowledge, and the enduring love for food that had started in her Lola's kitchen all those years ago. In her dreams that night, Malaya saw a vision of the future. She saw kitchens around the world filled with chefs who understood the power of food to nourish not just bodies, but communities. cities and the planet itself. She saw farms flourishing with forgotten crops brought back from the brink of extinction by innovative chefs. She saw dining tables where meals were not just eaten, but celebrated as connections to culture, land, and shared humanity. And at the center of it all, she saw herself, still learning, still growing, still finding new ways to spread the message that had been at the heart of her journey from the very beginning, that cooking is indeed love made visible. As the years passed, Malaya Santos found herself at the helm of a culinary revolution that had spread far beyond the borders of the Philippines. The Sustainable Culinary Arts Academy, SCAA, had become a beacon of innovation in the global food world, its graduates reshaping kitchens and food systems across continents. One crisp morning, as Malaya walked through the SCAA campus, she marveled at how much had changed. The once new buildings were now weathered with use, each scratch and dent a testament to the countless students who had passed through its doors. The experimental gardens had matured into lush, productive spaces, showcasing rare and heirloom varieties of fruits and vegetables from around the world. As she entered the main building, Malaya was greeted by a flurry of activity. Students rushed past, arms full of books and kitchen tools, their faces alight with purpose. The air was filled with a mix of aromas, hinting at the diverse array of cuisines being explored in the kitchens. Malaya made her way to her office, where her assistant, Luis, was waiting with a stack of papers and a steaming cup of coffee. "Good morning, Chef Santos," Luis said, handing her the coffee. "You have a busy day ahead. The board meeting is in an hour, and then you have a video call with the UN Food and Agriculture Organization about expanding the heirloom crop program." Malaya nodded, taking a sip of the coffee. It was a special blend created by SCAA students, using beans from a cooperative of small-scale farmers in Mindanao. The rich, complex flavor was a daily reminder of the impact their work was having. "Thank you, Luis," she said. "Any other news I should know about?" Luis hesitated for a moment. "Well, there is one thing. We've received an invitation from the World Economic Forum. They want you to be a keynote speaker at their annual meeting in Davos. The theme is reimagining global food systems, and they believe your work at SCAA embodies the kind of innovative thinking they want to showcase." Malaya felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The World Economic Forum was a gathering of some of the most influential people in the world. It was an incredible opportunity to share SCAA's vision on a global stage, but it also meant stepping even further into the spotlight. "That's quite an honor," Malaya said, carefully considering her words. "Let's discuss it after the board meeting. I want to make sure we approach this in a way that aligns with our values and mission." As Luis left to prepare for the board meeting, Malaya took a moment to center herself. She looked at the wall of her office, covered in photos of SCAA students and faculty working in communities around the world. There were images of students teaching sustainable fishing practices in coastal villages, of graduates opening zero-waste restaurants in major cities, of faculty members presenting research on climate resilient crops. These images reminded Malaya of why she had started this journey. It wasn't about personal accolades or global recognition. It was about creating real, meaningful change in the way the world approached food. The board meeting was a lively affair, with passionate discussions about new initiatives and the challenges of SCAA's rapid growth. Malaya listened carefully to each board member, from the young chef-turned-entrepreneur who had graduated in SCAA's first class to the veteran food policy expert who had joined the board to lend her expertise. As the meeting wound down, Malaya brought up the invitation from the World Economic Forum. "I believe this could be a significant opportunity for us," she said. "Wisely. If we accept, how can we ensure that our message isn't just heard, but that it leads to concrete action?" The ensuing discussion was thoughtful and strategic. The board agreed that Malaya should accept the invitation, but with a plan to leverage the opportunity for maximum impact. They would use the platform not just to showcase SCAA's work, but to launch a global initiative that would bring together chefs, policymakers, and industry leaders to address the most pressing issues in the global food system. As Malaya left the board meeting, her mind was already already racing with ideas for her Davos presentation. She knew she needed to create something that would not only inform, but inspire action. She wanted the world's decision-makers to understand the power of culinary education in addressing global challenges like climate change, food security, and cultural preservation. The next few months were a whirlwind of preparation. Malaya worked closely with her team at SCAA to develop a comprehensive presentation that would showcase the Academy's innovative approach to culinary education and its real-world impact. They decided to focus on three main areas: the heirloom crop program and its role in preserving biodiversity, the zero-waste culinary initiative that was revolutionizing how kitchens approach food waste, and the community culinary empowerment project that was using cooking skills to create economic opportunities in underserved communities. As the date of the forum approached, Malaya found herself reflecting on her journey. She thought about the little girl who once watched in awe as her Lola transformed simple ingredients into magical dishes. She thought about the young chef at Cucina, eager to prove herself in the culinary world. She thought about the competitor who had won that life-changing culinary competition, and the restaurateur who had pushed the boundaries of Filipino cuisine. Each of these experiences had shaped her, leading her to this moment where she stood poised to influence the future of global food systems. It was a responsibility that both excited and humbled her. The night before her departure for Davos, Malaya received an unexpected visitor at SCAA. It was Eleanor, her former sous chef, and now the executive chef at Lhasa. "I couldn't let you leave for Davos without saying goodbye," Eleanor said, pulling Malaya into a warm hug. "And I wanted to give you something to take with you." Elena handed Malaya a small, carefully wrapped package. Inside was a beautiful, hand-carved wooden spoon. "This is from your Lola's village," Elena explained. "I had it made by a local artisan, using traditional techniques. I thought you might like to have a piece of home with you when you're speaking to the world." Malaya felt tears prick at her eyes as she ran her fingers over the smooth wood. "Thank you, Elena," she said softly. "This means more than you know." As they sat together, sharing a meal of simple but perfectly prepared Filipino dishes, Malaya and Elena reminisced about their journey together. They laughed about the chaotic early days at Lhasa, marveled at how far they had both come, and shared their dreams for the future. "You know," Elena said as the evening drew to a close, "when you first told me about your plans for SCAA, I was worried. I thought you might be leaving behind everything we had built at Lhasa, but now I see that you've taken the spirit of what we created there and amplified it beyond anything we could have imagined." Malaya nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude for her friend and colleague. "Lhasa will always be a part of me," she said. "In many ways, SCAA is an extension of what we started there, a way to share our philosophy with the world." As Elena left, Malaya felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was ready to take on Davos, not just as an individual, but as a representative of every chef, farmer, and food artisan who had been part of her journey. The World Economic Forum was unlike anything Malaya had ever experienced. The small Swiss town of Davos was transformed into a global hub with world leaders, business tycoons, and thought leaders from every field imaginable gathering to discuss the most pressing issues facing the planet. As Malaya navigated the busy conference center, she found herself in conversations with people she had only ever read about in the news. There were tech billionaires interested in investing in sustainable agriculture, policymakers grappling with the challenges of feeding a growing global population, and environmental activists pushing for more urgent action on climate change. In each of these interactions, Malaya found herself drawing on her experiences from her childhood in the Philippines to her work at SCAA. She spoke passionately about the power of food to connect people to their culture and to the earth. She shared stories of how culinary education was creating economic opportunities in underserved communities to think differently about the role of chefs in addressing global challenges. On the day of her keynote speech, Malaya woke early. She spent a quiet moment holding the wooden spoon Eleanor had given her, drawing strength from its connection to her roots. Then, with a deep breath, she made her way to the main auditorium. As Malaya took the stage, she looked out at the sea of faces before her. There were government ministers sitting next to celebrity chefs, CEOs next to small-scale farmers who had been invited to share their perspectives. In that moment, she felt the weight of responsibility responsibility on her shoulders, but also the incredible opportunity she had been given. "Ladies and gentlemen," Malaya began, her voice clear and confident, "we stand at a crossroads in human history. The choices we make about our food systems in the coming years will determine not just what we eat, but the very future of our planet and our societies." Over the next hour, Malaya took her audience on a journey. She spoke about the hidden costs of our current food system, from environmental degradation to the loss of cultural heritage. She shared success stories from SCAA's programs showing how culinary education could be a powerful tool for positive change. And she laid out a vision for a future where food production nourished both people and the planet. As she concluded her speech, Malaya issued a challenge to her audience. "The solutions to our global food challenges will not come from any one sector or any one approach," she said. "They will come from collaboration, from bringing together the wisdom of traditional food systems with the innovations of modern science. They will come from empowering communities to take control of their food futures. And they will come from recognizing that every meal is an opportunity to create positive change." The response to Malaya's speech was overwhelming. As she stepped off the stage, she was surrounded by people eager to learn more, to collaborate, to be part of the movement she was building. World leaders pledged support for SCAA's programs. Business leaders offered to fund new initiatives, and fellow chefs from around the world expressed their desire to join the cause. In the days that followed, Malaya found herself in a whirlwind of meetings and discussions. She signed agreements to expand SCAA's programs to new countries, participated in panel discussions on the future of food, and even cooked a special meal for a group of influential attendees, showcasing the flavors and stories of Philippine cuisine. As the forum came to a close, Malaya felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She knew that the real work was just beginning, that the promises and plans made in Davos would need to be turned into concrete action, but she also felt a sense of hope that she hadn't expected. The enthusiasm and commitment she had seen from people across different sectors had convinced her that real change was possible. On her last night in Davos, Malaya found a quiet moment to call home. She spoke with Luis, getting updates on SCAA and sharing the outcomes of the forum. She called Elena, thanking her again for the wooden spoon that had been her talisman throughout the event. And finally, she called Mr. Reyes, her old mentor from Kusina. "Malaya," Mr. Reyes said, his voice warm with pride, "I've been watching the coverage of the forum. You've come so far from that young chef who first walked into my kitchen." Malaya felt a lump form in her throat. "I couldn't have done any of it without you, Mr. Reyes. Everything I've accomplished, it all started at Kusina." "No, Anak," Mr. Reyes said gently. "Kusina may have been where you started, but this journey has been all yours. You've taken every lesson, every experience, and turned it into something extraordinary. Your Lola would be so proud." As Malaya hung up the phone, she felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun in her Lola's kitchen continued through Kusina and Lhasa and expanded with SCAA had now grown to encompass the world. Yet at its heart, it was still about the same thing: the power of food to nourish, to connect, and to create positive change. The return to SCAA after Davos was a homecoming filled with excitement and new purpose. Malaya's team had been closely following her activities at the forum, and they were eager to begin implementing the new initiatives and partnerships that had emerged from it. In the months that followed, SCAA underwent a period of rapid growth and evolution. New programs were launched, focusing on areas like climate-resilient agriculture, food policy reform, and culinary diplomacy. The Academy expanded its reach, establishing satellite campuses in other countries and launching online programs to reach students around the world. One of the initiatives Malaya was most excited about was the Global Culinary Heritage Project. Inspired by the success of the Heirloom Crop Program, preserve traditional culinary techniques and recipes from around the world. SCAA students and faculty traveled to remote communities, learning from elders and local cooks, and creating a digital archive of culinary knowledge that would be accessible to chefs and food enthusiasts worldwide. As SCAA's influence grew, Malaya found herself increasingly in demand as a speaker, consultant, and thought leader. She testified before government committees on food policy, advised international organizations on sustainable development goals, and mentored a new generation of chef activists who were using their culinary skills to drive social and environmental change. Despite her busy schedule, Malaya never lost touch with her roots. She made regular trips back to the Philippines, visiting Kusina and Lasa and spending time in the communities that had been part of her early culinary journey. She also made sure to keep cooking, often using the kitchens at SCAA to experiment with new ideas or to prepare meals for students and staff. One day, as Malaya was working in one of SCAA's teaching kitchens, she was struck by a sudden realization. She had been absent-mindedly preparing sinigang, the sour soup that had been one of her Lola's specialties. As she tasted the broth, adjusting the balance of sour and savory flavors, she found herself transported back to her childhood kitchen. In that moment, Malaya understood that despite all the changes in her life, despite the global stage she now occupied, she was still that little girl learning to cook at her Lola's side. The lessons she had learned then about respecting ingredients, about cooking with love, about the power of food to bring people together were still at the core of everything she did. This realization led Malaya to her next big project. She decided to write a book, not just a cookbook, but a memoir that would trace her culinary journey and the lessons she had learned along the way. She wanted to share the stories of the people who had shaped her path, from her Lola to Mr. Reyes, from the farmers and fishermen she had met on her travels to the students at SCAA who continued to inspire her. As Malaya began work on the book, she found herself reflecting deeply on her life's journey. She thought about the challenges she had faced, the moments of doubt and the triumphs. She remembered the first time she had won a cooking competition, the opening night of Lhasa, the day SCAA had welcomed its first class of students. But more than the big moments, Malaya found herself focusing on the small, everyday experiences that had shaped her. The quiet mornings in her Lola's kitchen, learning to listen to the sizzle of garlic in oil, the late nights at Kusina, experimenting with new flavor combinations, the conversations with farmers and food artisans, learning about their struggles and their dreams. As the book took shape, Malaya realized that it was more than just her story. It was a testament to the power of food to transform lives, to build bridges between cultures, to heal the planet. It was a call to action for readers, to think differently about their relationship with food, to recognize its potential as a force for positive change. The process of writing the book also led Malaya to think about the future. She was proud of what she had accomplished with SCAA, but she knew that there was still so much work to be done. The global food system was still facing enormous challenges, from climate change to inequality to the loss of culinary heritage. As she neared completion of the book, Malaya began to formulate a new vision for SCAA. She wanted to create a global network of culinary schools, each rooted in its local food culture but connected to a broader movement for sustainable, equitable food systems. She imagined a future where chefs were not just cooks, but leaders in their communities, advocates for better food policies, and stewards of culinary traditions. The day the book was published, Malaya held a special event at SCAA. She invited everyone who had been part of her journey, from her old colleagues at Kusina to her current students and faculty. As she stood before them, holding a copy of her book, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. "This book," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "is not just my story. It's the story of every person who has been part of this incredible journey. It's a testament to the power of food to change lives, to build communities, to heal our planet, and it's a reminder that our work is far from over." As Malaya looked out at the faces of her friends, colleagues, and students, she saw the future of the culinary world. She saw chefs who would use their skills not just to create delicious meals, but to address global challenges. She saw educators who would inspire the next generation to think differently about food and its impact on the world. She saw innovators who would develop new technologies and techniques and equitable. In that moment, Malaya felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that the journey she had begun in her Lola's kitchen all those years ago was far from over. There were still flavors to discover, techniques to master, challenges to overcome, but she was ready for whatever lay ahead, armed with her knowledge, her experience, and her enduring love for the transformative power of food. As the event wound down and guests began to leave, Malaya found herself herself alone in the SCAA kitchen. She ran her hand along the smooth countertop, thinking about all the meals that had been prepared here, all the lessons that had been learned. On impulse, she reached for a pot and began to prepare sinigang, the dish that had started it all. As the familiar aroma filled the kitchen, Malaya smiled to herself. No matter where her journey took her next, she knew that this, the simple act of cooking a beloved dish, would always be at the heart of who she was. The sinigang simmered gently on the stove, its sour, savory scent a reminder of home, of heritage, of the long and winding path that had brought Malaya to this point. As she stirred the pot, adjusting the flavors with the instinctive skill of a lifetime in the kitchen, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. This was more than just soup. It was a bridge between past and future, a testament to the enduring power of culinary traditions and a promise of the meals yet to come. As Malaya ladled the steaming sinigang into a bowl, she knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new flavors to explore, and she was ready for all of it, one meal at a time. The success of Malaya's book and her continued work at SCAA had catapulted her into a new realm of influence. As she approached her 50th birthday, Malaya found herself at the center of a global movement to revolutionize food systems. Her inbox was constantly filled with invitations to speak at conferences, consult on international development projects, and collaborate with world-renowned chefs and scientists. One crisp morning, as Malaya walked through the SCAA campus, she was struck by how much had changed since the academy's early days. The once new buildings were now weathered with use, each scratch and dent telling a story of countless students who had passed through its doors. The experimental gardens had matured into lush, productive spaces, showcasing rare and heirloom varieties of fruits and vegetables from around the world. As she entered her office, Malaya was greeted by her assistant, Maria, who had once been one of her most promising students and was now an indispensable part of SCAA's leadership team. "Good morning, Chef Santos," Maria said, handing her a steaming cup of coffee. "You have a busy day ahead. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization is waiting for your video call about the expansion of the Global Culinary Heritage Project. And there's something else, a rather unusual request that I think you'll want to hear about personally." Malaya raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, what kind of request?" Maria handed her a letter. "It's from a small island community in the Sulu Sea. They're facing some serious challenges and they're asking for your help." As Malaya read the letter, she felt a familiar spark of excitement mixed with a sense of responsibility. The community was grappling with the impacts of climate change, overfishing, and the loss of traditional knowledge. They were reaching out to her, not just as a chef, but as someone who might be able to help them find a sustainable path forward. "This is exactly the kind of challenge we need to be taking on," Malaya said, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Maria, can you clear my schedule for next week? I think I need to see this situation firsthand." The journey to the small island took Malaya back to her roots in more ways than one. As the small boat approached the shore, she was struck by the crystal-clear waters and the lush greenery of the island. It reminded her of the coastal villages she had visited during her culinary journey across the Philippines years ago. The welcome she received was warm but tinged with urgency. The community leaders, a mix of elders and young activists, wasted no time in sharing their concerns. Climate change was altering fishing patterns and impacting crop yields. Young people were leaving the island in search of opportunities elsewhere, taking with them generations of traditional knowledge about local ingredients and cooking methods. As Malaya listened, she felt a deep sense of connection to their struggles. She saw in their story echoes of the challenges she had encountered throughout her career, from preserving culinary heritage to adapting to changing environmental conditions. Over the next few days, Malaya immersed herself in the life of the island. She went out with the fishermen at dawn, learning about their traditional fishing methods and the changes they had. She visited the small farms dotting the island, tasting fruits and vegetables she had never encountered before. In the evenings, she cooked with the local women, exchanging recipes and techniques. One afternoon, as Malaya was helping to prepare a traditional feast, she had an an epiphany. The solution to the island's challenges couldn't come from outside. It had to be rooted in the community's own knowledge and traditions. But perhaps she and SCAA could play a role in helping them adapt that knowledge to their new reality. Gathering the community leaders, Malaya shared her vision. She proposed a partnership between the island and SCAA, a pilot project that would combine traditional wisdom with modern sustainable practices. They would document the island's unique ingredients and culinary techniques, creating a living archive of food knowledge. At the same time, they would work on developing new climate-resilient agricultural practices and sustainable fishing methods. The excitement in the room was palpable as Malaya outlined her ideas. The elders nodded in approval, seeing in her plan a way to preserve their heritage. The younger members of the community were energized by the prospect of being part of an innovative project that could put their island on the map. As Malaya prepared to leave the island a week later, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This project represented a new direction for SCAA, a more direct engagement with communities on the front lines of climate change and cultural preservation. Back at SCAA, Malaya threw herself into bringing the island project to life. She assembled a team of experts in sustainable agriculture, marine conservation, and culinary anthropology. She reached out to her network of chefs and restaurateurs, seeking support and partnerships that could create economic opportunities for the island community. The project quickly became a model for a new kind of culinary education, one that went beyond the kitchen to address the complex challenges facing food systems around the world. SCAA students eagerly signed up for residencies on the island, seeing it as an opportunity to learn about sustainability in a real-world context. As news of the project spread, Malaya began receiving requests from other communities facing similar challenges. She realized that what had started as a single pilot project had the potential to grow into a global network of culinary conservation initiatives. One evening, as Malaya was reviewing the latest reports from the island project, she received an unexpected call. It was from the Secretary General of the United Nations, Chef Santos. The Secretary General began, "I've been following your work with great interest, particularly this new project in the Sulu Sea. We believe that your approach, combining culinary heritage preservation with sustainable development, could be a powerful tool in addressing some of the most pressing issues facing our planet." Malaya listened intently as the Secretary General outlined a proposal. The UN was launching a new initiative focused on food security and cultural preservation in the face of climate change. They wanted Malaya and SCAA to play a central role, scaling up their approach to work with vulnerable communities around the world. As she hung up the phone, Malaya felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The UN proposal represented an incredible opportunity to expand the impact of her work, but it also meant stepping even further into the global spotlight, taking on responsibilities that went far beyond the culinary world. Over the next few months, Malaya found herself shuttling between SCAA, the island community, and UN headquarters in New York. She worked tirelessly to develop a framework for the global initiative, drawing on everything she had learned throughout her career. The program, which they named Culinary Roots, Sustainable Futures, was ambitious in scope. It aimed to create a network of community-based culinary conservation projects around the world, each rooted in local traditions but connected to a global movement for sustainable food systems. As the initiative took shape, Malaya felt as if everything in her life had been leading to this moment. Her experiences, from learning to cook in her Lola's kitchen to running a Michelin-starred restaurant to founding SCAA, had all prepared her for this new challenge. The launch of Culinary Roots Sustainable Futures was a global event. Malaya found herself addressing the UN General Assembly, sharing her vision for a world where culinary traditions were preserved and celebrated, where food systems worked in harmony with nature, and where communities were empowered to shape their own food futures. As she spoke, Malaya thought about her long journey, from the little girl watching her Lola cook to the global leader she had become. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for every experience, every mentor, every challenge. In the years that followed, Malaya divided her time between SCAA and her work with the UN initiative. She traveled the world, from the Arctic to the Amazon, working with indigenous communities to document and preserve their culinary heritage. She collaborated with scientists to develop new, sustainable food production methods that drew on traditional knowledge. She mentored a new generation of chef activists who were using their culinary skills to drive social and environmental change. Throughout it all, Malaya never lost touch with her roots. She made regular trips back to the Philippines, visiting Kusina and Lasa, and spending time in the communities that had been part of her early culinary journey. She continued to cook, finding in the simple act of preparing a meal a grounding force amidst her whirlwind of global responsibilities. As Malaya approached her 60th birthday, she began to think about her legacy. SCAA had grown into a global network of culinary schools, each rooted in its local food culture, but connected to a broader movement for sustainable, equitable food systems. The Culinary Roots Sustainable Futures initiative was making real, measurable impacts in communities around the world, but Malaya knew that there was still so much work to be done. The global food system was still facing enormous challenges, from climate change to inequality to the loss of biodiversity. She began to think about how she could ensure that the movement she had helped to build would continue to grow and evolve after she was gone. One day, as Malaya was teaching a masterclass at SCAA, she noticed a young student who reminded her of herself at that age. The girl, whose name was Amihan, had a fire in her eyes and a passion for Filipino cuisine that resonated deeply with Malaya. Over the next few months, Malaya took Amihan under her wing, mentoring her as Mr. Reyes had once mentored a young Malaya at Kusina. She saw in Amihan the same drive, the same deep connection to food and its power to create change. As Amihan flourished under her guidance, Malaya began to see a way forward. She realized that her true legacy wouldn't be in the institutions she had built or the accolades she had received. It would be in the next generation of culinary leaders, people like Amihan, who would take the movement she had started and carry it into the future. With this realization, Malaya began to shift her focus. She started to step back from some of her global responsibilities, delegating more to her team at SCAA and to the network of chefs and activists she had cultivated around the world. Instead, she poured her energy into mentoring, into sharing her knowledge and experience with the young chefs who would shape the future of food. On her 60th birthday, Malaya organized a special event at SCAA. She invited everyone who had been part of her journey, from her old colleagues at Kusina to the global network of chefs and activists she had worked with over the years. As she stood before them, Malaya felt a profound sense of completion. "When I started this journey," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "I was just a girl who loved to cook. I never imagined that love would take me around the world, would allow me to make a difference in so many lives. But standing here today, I realize that this journey has never been about me. It's been about the power of food to connect us, to sustain us, to heal our planet." As she looked out at the faces of her friends, colleagues, and students, Malaya saw the future of the culinary world. She saw chefs who would use their skills not just to create delicious meals, but to address global challenges. She saw educators who would inspire the next generation to think differently about food and its impact on the world. She saw innovators who would develop new technologies and techniques to make food production more sustainable and equitable. In that moment, Malaya felt a sense of peace. She knew that the movement she had helped to build would continue to grow and evolve, guided by the passion and creativity of the next generation. Her journey, which had begun in her Lola's kitchen all those years ago, had come full circle. As the celebration continued around her, Malaya slipped away to the SCAA kitchen. She tied on an apron and began to prepare sinigang, the dish that had started it all. As the familiar aroma filled the kitchen, she smiled to herself. No matter where life had taken her, no matter how far she had traveled from that little girl, in her Lola's kitchen, the simple act of cooking a beloved dish, would always be at the heart of who she was. The sinigang simmered gently on the stove, its sour, savory scent a reminder of home, of heritage, of the long and winding path that had brought Malaya to this point. As she stirred the pot, adjusting the flavors with the instinctive skill of a lifetime in the kitchen, she felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. This was past and future, a testament to the enduring power of culinary traditions and a promise of the meals yet to come. As Malaya ladled the steaming sinigang into bowls, ready to share it with the gathered guests, she knew that while her own journey might be winding down, the larger journey, the global movement to create a more sustainable and equitable food system, was just beginning. And as she carried the tray of steaming bowls out to her guests, Malaya Santos, once an underdog chef with big dreams, now a globally recognized culinary leader, felt a familiar spark of excitement. There were still flavors to discover, techniques to master, challenges to overcome. The world of food was ever-changing, ever-evolving, and there would always be a new generation ready to take up the cause. With a smile, Malaya began to serve the sinigang, watching as her guests, young and old from all corners of the world, came together over this simple, beautiful dish. In their faces, she saw the future, a future where food continued to be a source of joy, of connection, of positive change in the world. And she knew, with a deep and abiding certainty, that this future was in good hands. As Malaya entered her seventh decade, she found herself in a period of transition. The culinary world she had helped shape was evolving rapidly, with new technologies and global challenges reshaping the landscape of food production and consumption. While she remained a respected figure in the industry, Malaya increasingly found herself stepping back, allowing younger voices to take center stage. One crisp morning, as she walked through the SEAA campus, Malaya marveled at how much had changed since the Academy's early days. The experimental gardens had become a lush, biodiverse wonderland, showcasing sustainable agriculture techniques. From around the world, the kitchens hummed with the latest eco-friendly equipment, and classrooms were filled with students from every corner of the globe. As she entered her office, Malaya was greeted by Amihan, her protege, who had now become SCAA's Director of Innovation. "Good morning, Chef Santos," Amihan said, her eyes bright with excitement. "I have some news I think you'll want to hear." Malaya settled into her chair, intrigued. "What is it, Amihan?" "We've been approached by a coalition of tech companies and environmental organizations," Amihan explained. "They're working on a project to develop sustainable food systems for long-term space missions and potential Mars colonization. They want SCAA to be a key partner in designing the culinary aspects of the project." For a moment, Malaya was speechless. Space missions, Mars colonization. It seemed a far cry from the humble kitchens where she had started her journey. Yet, as she considered the proposal, she felt a familiar spark of excitement. "Tell me more," Malaya said, leaning forward. Over the next hour, Amihan outlined the project. It was ambitious, combining cutting-edge technology with age-old techniques of food preservation and cultivation. The goal was to create a self-sustaining food system that could support human life on long-term space missions and eventually on Mars itself. As Malaya listened, her mind raced with possibilities. She thought about the techniques of food preservation she had learned from indigenous communities around the world, about the innovative approaches to urban farming developed by SCAA students, about the flavors and nutritional profiles of the countless ingredients she had encountered in her travels. "This is fascinating, Amihan," Malaya said when the younger woman had finished her explanation. "But I have to ask, why SCAA? Surely there are more technologically advanced institutions they could partner with." Amihan smiled. "That's exactly why they want us, Chef. They have the technology, but they need our expertise in creating delicious, nutritious food from limited resources. They need our understanding of how food shapes culture and community. In their words, they don't just want to keep people alive in space, they want to help them thrive." Malaya nodded, understanding dawning. This project wasn't just about feeding astronauts, it was about preserving the essence of what made food such a vital part of the human experience, even in the most extreme environments. "All right," Malaya said, her decision made. "Let's do it. But I want to make sure we approach this the right way. We need to assemble a team that represents the full diversity of global culinary traditions. And I want to make sure we're not just focusing on the space aspect, but on how this research can benefit communities here on Earth facing food scarcity." Over the next few months, SCAA became a hive of activity as they dove into the space food. On Project, Malaya found herself energized by the challenge, working alongside scientists, nutritionists, and chefs to develop new ways of growing, preparing, and preserving new food that could grow a variety of crops in minimal space. They developed new fermentation techniques to create flavorful, nutrient-dense foods with long shelf lives. They even worked on 3D printing technology that could produce textured, meat-like proteins from plant-based sources. Throughout the project, Malaya insisted on maintaining a connection to culinary traditions. She encouraged the team to draw inspiration from preservation techniques used by Arctic communities, from the flavors of fermented foods found in cuisines around the world, from the nutrient-dense indigenous crops that had sustained people for millennia. As the project progressed, Malaya found herself reflecting on her long career. She thought about how far she had come from that little girl in her Lola's kitchen, about all the twists and turns her culinary journey had taken. Now here she was, in the twilight of her career, helping to shape the future of food, not just on Earth, but potentially on other planets. One evening, as Malaya was working late in her office, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Elena, her old friend and colleague from Lhasa, now a renowned chef in her own right. "I heard about this space food project of yours," Elena said, settling into a chair across from Malaya. "I have to say, when we were young, chefs dreaming of changing the world through food, I never imagined it would lead to this." Malaya laughed, feeling a rush of affection for her old friend. "Neither did I, Elena, but in a way it makes perfect sense. Food has always been about nourishing people, about creating community, about connecting us to our environment. This project is just taking those principles to a new frontier." As they talked late into the night, sharing memories and musing about the future of food, Malaya felt a deep sense of gratitude for all the accolades she had received, for all the impact she had made on the culinary world. It was these connections, these shared passions, that truly gave meaning to her life's work. The Space Food Project continued to evolve, gaining attention from media outlets and scientific communities around the world. Malaya found herself giving interviews not just to food magazines, but to science journals and tech publications. She spoke at conferences where chefs shared the stage with astronauts and aerospace engineers. Throughout it all, Malaya remained committed to her core principles. She insisted that the project consider not just the nutritional and logistical aspects of space food, but also its cultural and emotional significance. She argued passionately for the importance of creating foods that would provide comfort and a sense of home for astronauts on long, isolating missions. As the project neared its first major milestone, a test of the food systems in a simulated Mars habitat, Malaya received an invitation that took her breath away. The space agency wanted her to be part of the team that would enter the habitat and live on the experimental space diet for a month. For a moment, Malaya hesitated. She was in her 70s now, and the physical demands of such an experiment would be challenging. But as she considered the opportunity, she felt a familiar fire ignite within her. This was a chance to truly understand the impact of their work, to experience firsthand the challenges and triumphs of the astronauts who would one day rely on these food systems. With the blessing of her doctors and the enthusiastic support of her team at SCA, Malaya began preparing for the Mars habitat experiment. She underwent rigorous physical training, studied the technical aspects of the habitat systems, and worked with the other participants to build the teamwork and communication skills that would be vital in the confined space of the habitat. The day Malaya entered the Mars habitat was one she would never forget. As the airlock sealed behind her and her fellow participants, she felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. For the next month, their lives would revolve around the food systems she had helped design. The first few days were challenging as they adjusted to the confined space and the rhythm of life in the habitat. But as they settled into their routines, Malaya found herself marveling at the resilience and adaptability of the human spirit. She watched as her fellow participants, initially skeptical of some of the unfamiliar foods, began to find comfort and enjoyment in the meals they prepared. Together, Malaya threw herself into the experiment with the same passion she had brought to every challenge in her career. She kept meticulous notes on the performance of different crops in the hydroponic systems, on the flavor profiles of the fermented foods, on the psychological impact of different meals, on the crew's morale. One evening, about halfway through the experiment, Malaya prepared a special meal for the crew. Using the limited ingredients available in the habitat, she created a dish while incorporating elements from the culinary traditions of her fellow crew members. As they sat down to eat together, Malaya saw in their faces the same joy, the same sense of connection that she had always believed was at the heart of what made food so powerful. When the airlock finally opened at the end of the month-long experiment, Malaya emerged with a new perspective on her life's work. She had seen firsthand the power of food to sustain not just bodies, but spirits, even in the most challenging environments. She had experienced the joy of creation, of nurturing life in a place designed to mimic one of the most inhospitable environments imaginable. In the weeks that followed, as the data from the experiment was analyzed and the results shared with the scientific community, Malaya found herself more in demand than ever. She was invited to speak at space conferences, to consult on long-term mission planning, to share her insights on the intersection of food, culture, and space exploration. But even as she embraced these new opportunities, Malaya never lost sight of her roots. She insisted that the lessons learned from the Space Food Project be applied to addressing food security issues on Earth. She worked with her team at SCAA to develop new programs focused on sustainable urban agriculture and innovative approaches to feeding growing populations in resource-constrained environments. As her 80th birthday approached, Malaya began to think seriously about her legacy. She had achieved more than she had ever dreamed possible, had influenced the culinary world in ways she could never have imagined when she was a young chef just starting out. But she knew that her greatest impact would be in the generations of chefs and food innovators she had inspired and mentored. One morning, as Malaya sat in her office at SCAA, she received a call that brought tears to her eyes. It was from the United Nations, informing her that she had been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for her lifelong work in promoting sustainable food systems and using culinary education as a tool for cultural understanding and environmental conservation. As she hung up the phone, Malaya felt a complex mix of emotions: pride in what she had accomplished, gratitude for all the people who had supported her along the way, and a sense of humility in the face of the enormous challenges still facing the global food system. She thought about her long journey, from the little girl learning to cook in her Lola's kitchen, to the young chef proving herself in culinary competitions, to the founder of SCAA, and now to a nominee for one of the world's most prestigious awards. Through it all, food had been her constant companion, her way of understanding the world and making a positive impact on it. That evening, Malaya did what she always did when she needed to center herself. She went to the SCAA kitchens and began to cook. As she prepared a simple meal of sinigang, the dish that had started it all, she felt the presence of all those who had shaped her journey: her Lola, Mr. Reyes, Elena, and countless others whose lives had intersected with hers through food. As the familiar aroma filled the kitchen, Malaya smiled to herself. No matter where life had taken her, no matter how far she had traveled from that little girl in her Lola's kitchen, the simple act of cooking a beloved dish, would always be at the heart of who she was. The sinigang simmered gently on the stove, its sour, savory scent a reminder of home, of heritage, of the long and winding path that had brought Malaya to this point. As she stirred the pot, adjusting the flavors with the instinctive skill of a lifetime in the kitchen, she felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. This was more than just soup. It was a bridge between past and future, a testament to the enduring power of culinary traditions and a promise of the meals yet to come. As Malaya ladled the steaming sinigang into a bowl, she knew that whatever the future held, whether Nobel Prizes or new culinary frontiers, she would face it as she always had, with love, creativity, and a profound respect for the transformative power of food. As she sat down to enjoy her meal, Malaya Santos, once an underdog chef with big dreams, now a globally recognized culinary leader and innovator, felt a familiar spark of excitement. There were still flavors to discover, techniques to master, challenges to overcome. The world of food was ever-changing, ever-evolving, and there would always be something new to learn, some way to make a positive impact. With each spoonful of sinigang, Malaya reaffirmed her commitment to the principles that had guided her throughout her career: to respect ingredients and the people who produce them, to preserve culinary heritage while embracing innovation, to use food as a tool for understanding, for connection, for positive change in the world. as she finished her meal to the future. There were new projects to develop at SCAA, young chefs to mentor, global challenges to address, and beyond that, who knew? Perhaps there would be kitchens on Mars to design, new forms of cuisine to pioneer in the far reaches of space. Whatever lay ahead, Malaya knew she would face it with the same passion, creativity, and love for food that had carried her through every stage of her remarkable journey. From her Lola's humble kitchen to the brink of interplanetary cuisine, Malaya Santos had always known one fundamental truth, that food was more than sustenance. It was a universal language of love, a powerful force for change, and an endless source of joy and discovery. As she cleaned up the kitchen, preparing to head home for the night, Malaya felt a sense of anticipation for what tomorrow might bring. In the world of food, every day brought new flavors, new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference, and she was ready for all of it, one meal at a time.